I didn't sell out, son. I bought in. Keep that in mind.
Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 249. This is Carl.
This is Josh.
And this is Campbell.
Hey, we actually didn't talk over each other that time.
This time.
We'll get it. So this episode, we are going to be talking about collaborative gaming. And that doesn't just necessarily mean narrative gaming. This is working together to provide us particular outcome. And we'll talk a little bit more about that once we get started. But real quick, just want to announce this show is sponsored by apparently my dog in the background, as well as Cody Cluck and Christopher Poland, two of our patrons from our Patreon. We super appreciate your guys' support. Thank you. And it's kind of kept Josh and I going a little bit at some points. And so if you're interested in that, you can find more about that at theindependentcharacters.com. Let me just throw out there while I'm talking about that. Please buy our t-shirts. A bunch of you said you'd buy them if I put them up for sale, and a bunch of you aren't buying. And now I got a bunch of stock to sell. I got stock. I got to move, baby. And we got the shipping down now. So the first large batch of folks that ordered them and paid up through last Wednesday have gone out. So you should be seeing those in your boxes very soon. But now Shell's actually helping with the shipping, Josh. So we got it down a lot better.
I'd say it's making me look bad.
Say it makes for the perfect holiday gift, but we're running up a little tight. Told you,
little tight
at the end of the month here.
Perfect New Year's gift.
There you go. So
True yourself.
And some of us more than others here are part of the Goonhammer Media Network. So you can check out media.goonhammer.com for more shows and information. Campbell knows all about that.
All too much. I am all but inseparable from Goonhammer Media right now. If you've kept an eye on the Goonhammer YouTube channel.
Awesome. Yeah, you know what? Before we go into it, tell us a little bit about what's going on with the Goonhammer Media channel.
Yeah, so I've been obviously part of the Goonhammer Media Network, been doing the Badcast since before the Goonhammer Media Network was a thing. We've always kind of been talking about it. But I've been doing YouTube stuff for Goonhammer for most of this year. And if y'all have been paying attention to that whole Grotmas thing, where there's like a new detachment every single day of December, we've been making videos covering every single one of them. It's been a lot. It has been a marathon, but we've been cranking them out on time. So if there's any of those you're interested in, go check out our YouTube channel. Just search Goonhammer on YouTube. We'll probably be the first result you see up there. And yeah, check that out.
And what I'll say is if you don't understand how much it takes to edit video, it takes a lot. And if you have ever edited video, then you understand the pain Campbell's going through. So.
Yeah, it's a lot, but I'm through the worst of it. So
Good. I'm glad to hear that. There was something else I was going to bring up there, but I completely slipped my mind. All right. Well, again, this episode, we're going to be talking about collaborative gaming. We'll go into more details about that. But before we leap into that, let's go into Elite Choice, which I picked mine. I think we were scheduled to record like a week ago at one point. I picked mine early on. And but I'm still sticking with it, though there has been some amazing stuff.
Still a good choice. Yeah.
And there's been some amazing stuff in the meantime. I chose James Front's Ultramarines Land Raider. He talked about first off, I continue to be a chicken about weathering stuff. And man, maybe the army I do after Sisters of Battle, I will weather that army. I'll commit to that right now. The next one I do, I'll weather, just to take a chance and do something different. But James is into like historical wargaming stuff as well. And so he took kind of his weathering techniques and such from that and applied it to this Land Raider. And this is what makes me ashamed that I don't weather stuff because it just adds like another level to the model but I'm just such a chicken. Once I get it kind of nice looking, I'm like, I don't want to mess this up.
It's an extra step of that kind of abstractness of 40K that kind of gets removed, right? It's less of a toy and it looks more like it makes it look more like it's in scale to the terrain that it's on the table with. And it increases the immersion with that. And just absolutely fantastic job with that kind of like rusty red Mars effect on the treads, and then like the streaking grime going down, and that clean. I like it that it's a desaturated blue Ultramarines Land Raider, but then you also add all the grime and weathering on top of that, and that white is no longer white. Like it looks like what white would actually look like if it's seen a battlefield for any amount of time. It's just a fantastic execution.
Breaking up the big fields of blue on that tank with these big shocks of white is so sharp. It looks so good. It's one of the reasons I love Ultramarines as a paint scheme. Yeah. And if you ever are going to try weathering, do it on white, because it feels like splattering paint on a white wall. It feels kind of almost dirty in a way. And then you start doing it and it feels good. It feels so good. And
so it does feel dirty.
Two things can be true at the same time. This looks incredible. I love.
There's so many Jackson Pollock references right there that work in every way. So
I'll also say I love that James was able to find the Forge World Land Raider doors.
Yes,
the classic ones from like the early mid 2000s, but that you can't really find anymore. And they look great on this, and they suit the weathering very well.
I had those all over my Ultramarines army. Like everything on my Ultramarines army had the Forge World stuff on it. It looks so good. It looks so good. And this, I agree with every point you guys just made here. I do like the desaturated blue as well, as opposed to like the super bright blue that you tend to see. Mm-hmm. It just makes it look like it's been outdoors. It's been worked. It's a working vehicle. It looks like it. So fantastic work, James. What'd you pick, Josh?
Similar to you, I actually had a really hard time narrowing down this episode's selection for Elite Choice because there was so much good stuff out there. But what I did choose was Lefteris Papadopoulos' Tamiya Velociraptor Rough Rider conversion. Oh yeah. So these were like, they went into the store, they saw the Tamiya Velociraptors and like, oh, those are about the perfect scale. Let me then take it's taking a bunch of bits, 3D printing bits, hitting up the bits box, etc., to convert these into not only exquisite Dino Riders from days of my childhood. That is a nice callback, anyways. But as we were talking about in the last Patreon episode, like just my love of conversion and how many projects have been just like conversion first projects for me. This one really spoke to me of just having a cool concept. Dinosaurs are always cool, right? And then you have green stuff sculpting, you have kit bashing, you have 3D printing, just to really bring this vision to life. And I think it's just a fantastic execution and worthy of a call out.
I think I love how disparate the bits are that they're using and how many of them I can identify, and yet how cohesive they look.
Right.
Like I'm seeing bits from the Tempestus Scion kits. I think those resin bits, I thought those were Wargames Atlantic bits or something like that. But the arms, like the spears, everything here just looks so right together, even though they're coming from a whole range of various places. This is an inspired and very well executed conversion.
What's what did you say the Velociraptors are from?
They're Tamiya.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize Tamiya did like airplane World War II scale kits, but apparently it has to do with Velociraptors, and they look pretty cool. So I'm very excited to see this not only go from the next phase of like, now we have the conversion. I can't wait to see it painted up, and I think it'll be just fantastic.
It's awesome. I think I get very remember Joust, the video game?
Yeah.
Yes.
I get kind of Joust vibes from it a little bit. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
If they were the more potentially accurate Velociraptors that probably had wings, then that would really, really go jousty.
Yeah. All right, Campbell. Let's go take a look at what the Badcast has going on.
All right. Well, Avery Ryan painted up this orc bust, and he is a Badcast listener too. So it's part of that Badcast independent characters Venn diagram that I rate here resembles a lunar eclipse.
You know what? Screw you, Avery.
Yeah, this orc bust is so freaking cool. Like painting busts is outside of my sort of skill set. Like again, it's still miniature painting, but it's not really the focus of my hobby. I'm more of a gaming forge kind of hobbyist here. But the fact that they just went like hard on this, and I can identify the work that goes into it. Like this brush control is so smooth. The gradations are so clean. If you look closely, like you can see all the brush strokes. It's not just like, you know, a zenithal airbrush sort of thing. Like this is like immaculate layered paint jobs here. I love the non-metallic metal silver, which again reads as real metallics. It's fantastic. I love the gradation on the horns.
I thought it was real metallic.
Yeah, right. And the like very subtle glazing on the nose, on the lips, on the gums, all that is such a great way to just bring in the realism of this thing, because it's this orc bust, but he's still got, you know, kind of a ruddy nose and lips and all that, and ears and so on. And that's what makes this thing really feel alive. That and the scar. And the last thing I'll say is so hard to do red on green and have it not look like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Like, I know 'tis the season, we're in mid-December here, but by going with sort of this like desaturated orangey pink sort of red, it doesn't clash. It doesn't just, you know, make your eyes vibrate when you look at it. It's just a beautifully done bust, and Avery did a lovely job with that.
Yeah. The depth of color, the details, everything, the tonality on that is incredible, where you have like the deep greens and like the recesses of the musculature highlighted all the way up to like a yellow, which also helps tie in then with the kind of orangey red of the shoulder pads and arm bands and kind of lower armor. It's fantastic. That is an incredible execution. Similar to Campbell, I am not a bust painter because if I'm painting something, it's going to hit the table, but I really appreciate this. This is a work of art, truly.
God, and all the little leather crackling on the belts and the belts and so on, just so good.
So I don't know if I talked about this, but at Nova, I spent a bunch of time talking with Dave Taylor, and I played a game with Dave Taylor. I talked about that. I talked with Jake. Jake and Dave do Build, Paint, Play, their podcast and show. And at one point, we were discussing the painting competition that was going on, and Jake was of the mind that you should have on the panel of judges somebody who is not a professional painter, so that they could look at a paint job and say, wow, that really leaps out at me, right? Without being kind of jaded. Like my friend Ryan, who develops video games, every time we play a video game, he's like, oh, see the lighting and the ray tracing. And I'm like, I don't see that. I just see like a cool. And so that was kind of Jake's thing. And I mentioned that to Dave, and he goes, let me tell you why Jake's wrong. and then Dave Taylor kind of laid out this thing where he said, you know, he was kind of showing me a diagram, but he said, if to this point you have not painted something, and you know, everything from this point down the field looks like magic to you. Like you don't know how it's done. You're like, that's incredible. How could that possibly be done? As you go down the path a little further and you start to learn about how to paint things, you start to see, oh, well, I see what they did there, and I see what they've done there, and I see how that is done. Boy, they did that well. But still, these guys at the very far end of the thing, it still can look like magic to you. I would count myself in kind of that. Like, I've taken a lot of painting classes. Like, I understand the concepts behind some of this stuff. When I look at Avery's painting here, I'm like, I don't know how some of this is done. It just looks amazing to me. And in particular, like the mouth area, the tusks around the mouth and stuff. Like, I understand blending and all that, but I'm just like, how do you pile that all together? And then how do you, the fact that the nose is a different color, like this is the thing when I say I'm like a paint by numbers guy, like I get a recipe and I'm like, yep, going to repeat that recipe over and over again on these units. When I look at a model like this is an artist. Like this is somebody that looked at it and didn't follow a recipe. They were like, well, I want to get in my head, I picture this shade of green, and here's how I'm going to get to that shade of green. And then, by the way, the nose will be different because, you know, when you scrunch up your face, your nose turns different color and the ears will have a little different coloration. And I'm like, I never would have thought of that. I never would have. Like, so for me, this is truly a work of art when I look at it and I go, oh man, like I cannot achieve that right now. I'm not willing to put in the work to get to the point to achieve that. And quite frankly, I don't have the artist's mind where I'm like, aware of I just don't see things this way. I used to explain it to our buddy Doug, because he was a musician as well as other stuff. He was a triple threat.
Yeah.
And I'd say, I don't understand like how a band puts together a song. Like to me, it just doesn't compute. Like, do you start with the drums, or does some guy come up with a guitar for like, let's make everything work around that? You know, when I go to build an army list, I'm usually like, well, I like dudes and Land Raiders, so let me get a dudes and a Land Raider, and everything else goes around that, you know? So I don't understand how this works, but I can appreciate how amazing it looks. So anyway, that's my long story to get to that point.
When you get through your entire backlog, then you'll start painting bus and push it to the next level.
Sure. Yeah, that'll happen. That'll happen.
Let's do small steps. Carl, let's start sponge weathering soon.
You're right. There you go.
I'm there with you. Listen, I don't know if you know, but I took a weathering tank weathering class with Mr. Justin. The reason I bring that up is because I came across those pictures recently, and I was sending them over to Jeff, and I was like, "Oh, he taught us this like salt weathering technique," and I'm like, I never used it since.
Yeah, and
I'm like, I really should go back and do that on like, and then I look at my sisters of battle tanks. I'm like, but not with those. Those are too good looking.
I'll be straight up. If you do want to practice weathering, like actually what I did, so I'm working, just kind of jumping ahead here a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm working on an Imperial Guard army slowly, bit by bit, and I wanted to kind of like practice what my weathering was going to be for this army. And I had a spare side panel from a Rhino because I built like a Vindicator or something like that years and years ago, and I just had the spare side panel, and I just used that for practice. Sprayed it white, painted it the way I'd paint it, did all the sponge weathering powders and so on, figured out what colors I'd like to use for runoff and so on. So you have this stuff around to practice this stuff. Like you don't got to use it on your shiny new Exorcist or whatever. No, just sponge up part of an old Rhino or a scale model.
I have a Rhino that I use that's missing a few components to it, and so I just keep spraying it black, and then that'll be my test model for everything.
Yeah, there's so much spray paint on that Rhino. It's toughness 11 now.
Yeah. That's why it repairs. Campbell, since that makes a great segue, let's talk about your hobby progress. Let's go into the hobby progress section.
Sure. As I mentioned, I'm working on Imperial Guard or Astra Militarum for those of you out there. And this is a couple weeks of progress because I haven't really gotten to paint much in December, but that's okay. So first up, I've got this Cadian squad here. This is my first 10 of the new Cadians, and this kit is so lovely. This isn't even using the upgrade sprue, which I have that too. This is just using that stock kit, which has like 23 heads in it and all these different poses and all that stuff. And it is such comfort food to paint regular frickin' dudes with rifles in flak armor. It feels so natural. It feels so right. And I had such a good time painting these guys.
Okay, I want you to stop talking for a second. Because these guys look so freaking cool.
Yeah.
Like I am so jealous of how good these look. Like Campbell, every time I see you paint something new, like I feel like you outdid the last thing you did. And like the color combination on these guys, again, like it's really cool to use the whites on them instead. I really don't see that often. I usually see the deep green where you have the whites, and they look freaking awesome. They look freaking awesome.
So a little bit of backstory here. So I have a Valhallan army that's all metal.
Okay.
That I collected when I was like in 2011 because I was 21 years old. I finally had money and I wanted the army from my youth I could never have. And this is kind of a take on that same scheme, but it's a little more modernized with newer techniques and all that. It's based on like a World War I Russian cavalry scheme I really liked. And I wanted to go with like white flak armor on tan jackets, green pants, black leather for this sort of look. And for the transfers, I got my own transfers made. I designed a transfer sheet in Illustrator, sent it over.
These are transfers on the shoulder pads, the red numbers?
Yeah, the red numbers. And they've got
they look awesome
on the other side. And it is the I've got two halves of this army. It's the
squad number or company number?
Company, because it's the 617th Cadian and the 541st Krieg, which are the area of the like phone area codes for Boston and Oregon.
All right, it's not cool anymore.
It's a personal touch.
Yeah,
Campbell, these are amazing.
I appreciate that. they are going to last all of a second and a half once they hit the table.
Oh yeah, they're dead.
They're idiots. But I figured they're going to look so good on the side of the board.
Beautiful cannon fodder.
Yep. So I'm working on them.
Your bases are fantastic too, by the way.
That's a great scheme.
The basing is really simple. It is actually like the easiest part. What I actually do is I like hit it with like texture paste, whatever, and then I just wash it with a mix of brown, green, and black, and just let the wash just kind of mix itself for a natural variation. Dry brush it up, stick some tufts, some snow on there. That's kind of it. Some corks for rocks and so on.
It looks fantastic, but it works so well, and also. I'm also mad at how smooth that skull looks on your face. Like, this is really impressive. Like, these are
if each color of cloth is going to be a 4-stage highlight, you bet your ass the skulls are too. It's Warhammer. The skulls are important.
Dude, you are something else.
So now the thing is, these guys are going to fail their morale tests, and that's why I painted a commissar for them, who is Commissar's Duty. It was I think I got it at the Tacoma Open. It was like the event exclusive model last year. And I've had them lying around, and I just wanted to start knocking out some of the little minis and boxes I've got. And this guy, I painted him on Thanksgiving in basically one sitting. Just hung out and had a lovely time just painting up this commissar.
Looks awesome.
Yeah.
Castellan looks freaking cool, too.
Yeah, I got a Castellan as well, because, again, just going through my little like boxes of random one-off minis. And yeah, this guy, I realized when I was painting him that he actually... There was an old Brian Nelson metal Cadian Commander model, which had the same sash, the same head I've got on him, but with like a hand behind his back and a sword, like with a big old basket hilt. And I realized it's basically kind of a soft remake of the same model, which I really liked. I thought that was a very cute little detail. But this model was just fun. Nice. Again,
the other great thing about this model is he has one bionic eye, so there's no way you can paint his eyes crossed.
That does make things easier.
Yeah.
The other thing I used to do a lot was when I'd have a guy like with a rifle where I couldn't like paint his eye or whatever. Yeah. I would just leave one of them flesh colored because he's, like squinting
one
eye.
See it.
He's a wizard. Yeah.
And lastly, I painted up Unbroken, who is the Warhammer Plus Kasserkin model. And so again, this is same scheme as the rest of these guys. And this model, it's based on an old piece of Karl Kopinski artwork that I fell in love with in the old 3rd edition Imperial Guard Codex. And man, it's just, I was so happy to get this guy painted, get this guy done, get him out of my backlog. And
looks nice.
Just make him look like a real tired, worn out soldier.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The thing I like about that piece of artwork and this one is like clearly like he's like a skilled soldier, but he's tired, right? Mm-hmm. Like he's exhausted by what he's gone through, and he's like on to the next thing.
He survived more than 15 minutes.
Yeah,
I'm also really appreciating the freehand Aquilas on the smoke or crack grenades there. I'm not sure which they are, but
those are transfers.
Never mind.
Yeah, take it all back. Yeah, no, those
they
are
phoned it in on this guy.
But I did also put the little Cadia stands transfer on the back.
I see that
because there's room there for it.
Yeah, to your point, Josh. He's like, I'm 20 minutes into a 15-minute tour.
Right? Yeah, exactly. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I just
that looks great, dude.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the guy after the opening credits of the Imperial Guard movie.
Yeah.
But continue the guard train. I built a Sentinel, magnetized all the weapon, or I think I magnetized all the weapon options, but I only primed a couple because I doubt I'll ever use them.
You'll ever use some of them. Yeah,
I still it's built, so if those become good in the future, I can just do that. I don't know if I'll get to it soon. I might get distracted and do something else, but that's probably what's next is a Sentinel for these guys.
I really should have gone first because you guys have accomplished a lot more than I have in this thing. So, Josh,
actually, no, you guys can talk for a while because I gotta
celebrate
a grippy Ripmus over here.
Well deserved for the painting accomplishments.
I think I'm gonna have my wife bring me a mixed drink instead.
Okay. You got a bartender on your staff? I know the Patreon was bringing in that kind of money.
Yeah.
She'll make good cocktails.
Sick money. As in I get sick every time I see my bank account. Okay. Josh, what have you been working on?
Yep. So I've been continuing the old Sharkadon train there. So close to calling this Primaris contingent of the army done. So with that, I had these base coded for a little bit, but needed a ton of detail work and everything like that. So I just jumped in. First thing I painted was the Ballistus Dreadnought, which is the obviously the shooty box dread of Redemptor variety. And this was just fun. I wanted an alternate option. Like, I have the Ballistus and the Brutalis that I finished up last episode, so I can kind of like pick and choose, swap in between. Do I want a little bit more up close and personal work? Do I want to add a little bit of range support? And just I probably won't run them both at the same time, but can kind of swap in and out of those. I do on all of these, I do want to go back and add a little bit more weathering to match the existing vehicles, but I'm going to do a big batch of weathering at the end, which I, again, only have a handful of models left. So after that, also painted up a Land Raider Redeemer. What's better than one Land Raider? Two Land Raiders.
Oh,
three is better, but
I don't have three. Two's my limit for this, but did want to get a second Land Raider. I did magnetize this so I can actually run it as a kind of Godhammer or Redeemer. I also have the Crusader bits, but I probably will never run it as a Crusader because it just doesn't work for the army the same way. It doesn't fill the need that I need.
If you want to run 6 aggressors and a Gravis captain or whatever, that becomes viable. But it does. A Crusader doesn't actually do anything.
I don't need the transport capacity, and I need the weapons because I am running an assault army. So it's fun. So so this as you can see in the picture that I have in the notes here, actually has the heavy bolter on it instead of the assault cannon because I hadn't swapped it over yet. But I've got the bits to do whatever, and that's all magnetized, ready to go. Again, I will take this up a little bit in weathering to match the existing tanks and Land Raider that I have in the army there. Very happy with how it turned out. I was using the Forge World transfers on this one, and they are so old now that they are pretty brittle. So I actually had a few transfers, even with double like gloss varnishes on them, starting to tear and peel up, which I noticed mostly on the Vindicator, which was the next thing that I painted up. So you'll actually see on the front kind of dozer blade, the shield there, the shark in the corner there is actually torn up in a couple spots, and that's just like the brittleness of these old transfers, and the adhesion isn't as good as when they were fresh. But I'm actually going to be weathering this one quite a bit, especially the I did kind of an alternate hazard striping on that front shield using white and gray because I think yellow would have been too loud again for this army. But I really need to get into the white with a bunch of weathered kind of gray to break up. It's way too crisp and clean right now, but I intentionally wanted to leave that until I'm doing the rest of the weathering for this army to grunge that up a bit and take it to the next level. And then in addition to that, I've also painted up a Primaris Tech Marine who is ready for decals and oil wash. So he's almost done. Should definitely have him for the next episode. And the last thing I've got in this Primaris army, which I have built and started the base coating on, are 5 Assault Terminators.
Nice.
Which I will now have 20 Terminators when this is done, but I'll have every variety that there is, every flavor of Terminator. And I thought I could either do 10 more assault intercessors to unload out of a Land Raider, but I've already got that, so I figured I wanted to go. My vision right now is a Terminator Librarian with Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators, giving them devastating wounds and sustained hits, which could be a fun combo. It's not going to be like the most competitive, but I think it'll help get them a couple extra hits, and running the Liberator Assault group, they get the extra attack, and they're all strength 10 with Thunderhammers.
Nice.
It'll get some work done. So Carl is sipping his cocktail, looking quite pleased with himself.
Is that a Mai Tai you got there, friendo?
No, it's it's the equivalent of a 7 and 7, but using Crown and Sprite. I think Shell and I were calling it a Suburban because we were trying to make Sprite and bourbon. Suburban.
That's funny. Josh, so I want to ask, are the legs from your Ballistus from the Brutalis Dreadnought?
They are.
Nice.
Yes.
I like that. I think the Ballistus has like a nice modeled base, but if you have two of them standing next to each other, they're both doing the Captain Morgan pose, and having that variety is a good thing.
I do like the pose. I actually ended up liking the Ballistus legs better on the Brutalis, which is why I did the swap, and then this one worked out. This one's a little bit more off kilter because it's supposed to have a little bit more motion versus like a bracing firing platform. But I was happy with how it came out, and my basing obviously didn't work with the existing Hero Rock, so I had to do something anyways, since I have a very kind of Zone Mortalis boarding action style basing scheme for the army.
Yeah, I'm loving the look of these. I'm looking forward to seeing how you grunge them up, chip them up, make them all messy and dirty, because actually, again, the thing with the transfers being kind of brittle and flaking off, weathering over them is genuinely a great way to hide that and or make that bug a feature.
I was a little bummed, and I was like, "Yeah, it'll be fine. I'll just weather it."
I mean, when I was doing the test panel of armor, I was also using some really old transfers, and they were so old that if I wanted to scratch them up to weather them, I just took my nail and just ran that over them and just cut them open that way.
Like that part's gone. Yeah, so all the existing, the non-Primaris contingent of this army was pretty heavily weathered. All my Rhinos, Land Raider, Predators, other Dreadnoughts, etc. So I'm going to be matching that scheme. I don't know if I'll take it to the extreme with more of the kind of multiple layers of chip paint look. That's probably further than I will take it for now, but I definitely at least want to get it up to that kind of battle worn, dirty, grunged look more so than it is for now. Yeah,
sweet.
And then I'll keep coming back to it and touching things up here and there. But yeah, pretty happy with where it stands. And like I said, I'm just going to do one kind of big batch of vehicle weathering, and then one big batch of adding some extra gore to the infantry that don't have it yet, and that'll put me where I'm happy to be just in time for War on the Shore next month.
Oh hell yeah!
Very nice.
I'm taking sharks to Hawaii.
There you go. Yeah, I'm looking forward to War on the Shore as well. So
yeah,
it'll be fun.
It'll be good. I'm actually really excited to play 5 games over 3 days. Like, it's a nice kind of chill schedule, but should be good to play just a bunch of variety of different armies that I probably don't normally play against.
So I don't know if I mentioned last time. I looked at the notes and I didn't see it there, but I don't have it in these notes. So I've been doing a bunch of work helping Shell get some of her Night Lords up and going, and I don't think I talked about her Vindicator. Maybe it was, I don't know if I did, but I did all the base coating, airbrushing on her Vindicator, including all the lightning bolts and stuff for the Night Lord stuff. So all that was done. Then I just today was working on her squad. What's the Nemesis Claw squad? Yeah. But she's planning on using it not just for Kill Team, but also in her actual army.
Nice.
And so I got all the airbrushing base coats on that. And, there's like a technique that, Caleb taught me that involves some dry brushing and then dry brushing and then filtering, through an airbrush speed paints and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, got all 10 of those done. Plus I got her Warp Smith done and prepped. I need to do the lightning bolts on them. And then she does all the detail work from there. Still finding, I think, the airbrush a little intimidating at the moment, but she's over at the painting table right now, starting painting. So, still living the dream there. Mm-hmm. Ryan, my buddy Ryan, came up. I actually just talked about him earlier when I was talking about video game design, and he and I played a game which I'll talk about in a bit. But he's playing Eldar, and so one of the things he was struggling with were his Wraith Guard, which he left his army here overnight a couple nights because he and the family were in town, and it was all for Thanksgiving stuff. And so one of those mornings, I just got up and started painting his Wraith Guard for him because he was like, I kind of wanted to try a technique on him, very much similar to the technique I was using for Shell's Night Lords. And so I got kind of the base coats all on his Wraith Guard for him, which is about 10 Wraith Guards. So I knocked those out super fast. It didn't take much time. Those are great models to paint, by the way. And just, I love all the Wraith units in the Eldar line. So
it's such a distinctive silhouette and a distinctive design that also is just so clean and elegant.
It's so good. Like
and
every time I think about the
stuff.
Eldar, and I may start playing Shell's Eldar a little bit just to change it up a bit. And there's a few units I want to like kind of finish up some detail work on Shell's army.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but every time I think about the Eldar, I think back to our Show of Force on the Eldar, because of all the Show of Force episodes we did, like that was the one that for me, I was like, wow, they really thought about everything here, about how the Eldar race works, what they look like, how their society functions, like everything was just so well thought out before it ever even came out. I mean, so when the first Eldar Codex really came out, there's like all this artwork and everything that lives to today, and it's still just fantastic.
Yeah. The Rogue Trader Eldar were different from the first Codex, which came out in second edition. So there was some evolution there, but Rick Priestley and Jess Goodwin just like delivered that thing, and it has not needed to be revised.
No, no, it's a real nice work of science fantasy. So
yeah, absolutely.
And then the last thing is I started slap chopping my Mordor battle host, Josh. So you'll appreciate that.
Yes, nice. I'm super excited to play some Middle Earth strategy battle game at some point. Yeah,
so that's about it for me. I feel like, all right, I got to buckle down and start painting again. That's one of the things I like about these conversations. It does get me a little fired up. Shell continues to give me a hard time about not making or completing any commitments for the Hobby Progress Challenge, which is just going gangbusters. And I'm like, yeah, well, I burned myself out, kind of painting a couple armies, and now I'm starting to ease back into it. So I'll get something done for the next episode for sure. Before the next episode.
It seems like you got a good amount of painting done just for other people.
Yeah, I just like
you're a helper.
Look, I'll be honest. Like I hit this point with my Sisters of Battle. I was working on one unit. I was the white for some reason. Like this is not the first unit I've done the white on the like inside of their cloaks, and the white was just not working. Like every time I'd go back to it, I was like, oh man, why is this not working? I really don't like the way this looks. And so I'm kind of it kind of demotivated me from like, I got to go back and I got to fix those units a little bit. And it just felt like a real big setback there. So, and Arya agrees. So
got our fourth chair here.
Arya, settle down. Not doing Space Wolves. So then let's go into games played. And why don't I go ahead and go first, since you guys got some stuff too. So as I mentioned, Ryan had come up. He's down in San Diego, by the way. And so he came up to visit. And actually, before I talk about this game, the other thing is both Cheyenne and Travis want to play more 40K. Travis is tired of losing to Cheyenne. and Cheyenne's a pretty good player.
Cheyenne's tired of stomping Travis. So
probably
makes sense.
And so we made a point of saying, let's set, they're all down in Southern California. For those who don't know, it's about 6-7 hours from here. And so we made a point of scheduling one day a quarter that they are either going to come up here or I'm going to go down there, and we're going to just focus on playing some 40K games. So, nice. I've set that up, and I'm gonna kill this. I don't need to. She's 14. I know it's gonna break my heart this year. But all that being said, my buddy Ryan came up, and he brought his Eldar, and very few vehicles in the list. I think he had a Falcon at one point with fire dragons in it. Primarily Wraithguard and a bunch of Harlequins with the Avatar of Cain in there. What else was he rocking? God, those Harlequins were just their saves were just crazy good. So Wraithguard with a Spirit Seer, so you could constantly bring a guy back. I kind of gave him the rundown on my army and what it does. In particular, I always point people out to the what am I trying to say? Hellbrute, not the Hellbrute, the
Forge Fiend.
Forge Fiend, the
Forge Fiend, the Demon Prince.
Yeah, which people are always, they kind of see it and they go, okay, and I go, I'm telling you, this thing packs a lot of punch, and they're like, okay, and then it punches them.
Yeah, you don't understand. It packs a lot of.
I'm
punch.
really trying to tell. I don't like to surprise people,
Mm-hmm.
and so game started out. My first round of shooting, I went first. My first round of shooting was really kind of a dud. Like, that my concern was these fire dragons in the Falcon, because everything else he had on the table wasn't as mobile as that unit. And the really powerful thing, I think, with Eldar, again, not an Eldar player right now, but I'll tell you what I fear when I play them, is their mobility, like their ability to get across the table, get onto objectives, all this. We were playing objective based game, but also in conjunction with the objective scoring, it was units destroyed. So pretty basic game overall.
Mm-hmm.
I fired everything I could at the Falcon in the first round, and I did destroy it. And that was the only thing. Like, the rest of my shooting was fairly ineffective. I had very little shooting at other things. Like, I kind of focused on the Falcon. And once I took that out, then he struggled for position, because I had a bunch of tanks and stuff. I was moving around the board. But he struggled to move quickly where he wanted to be. I didn't lose a lot in the first round either, so it was kind of fairly ineffective as he moved in. And then the second round, I hit his Wraith Guard with the Forge Fiend, and then he, started to see the power of chaos as I started like wiping out those guys. But also, as his one unit that did move very fast were these Harlequins that started coming at me, and boy, I learned that they have really high saves. So started throwing everything at them, and I was finally able to destroy that unit. He had like I wish I had his list, because he had a particular IC character with the unit that was causing, it to have other abilities, and just made it more durable. And, but eventually, I weathered it down. I think I started seriously losing some units in round 3, but by round 3, I had pretty much crushed a lot of what he was throwing at me. And then, by round 5, I mean, the game ended pretty decisively, I think, in Chaos's hands. Ryan plays, I think, with a friend, at least once or twice a month. But I don't know that he's playing in broader things right now. And so I don't think he's had a lot of experience with 10th edition yet, just a bit, like he's doing Crusade with a friend and whatnot. But when your pool is that small, as we discovered, when we started playing, there was a group of about 5 or 6 of us that were playing. And then as soon as I went to an event and I met those guys up at in-game, and it was like, oh, here's like a much bigger pool of players, and here's all the lessons they've learned and what I'm learning from them. It was eye-opening. And so, but Ryan is also, he's an engineer. So like, much like our buddy from Adeptus Titanicus, Josh, Ivan, he's an engineer. He's mathematically inclined. So he knows, like, okay, here's how many dice I'm going to throw. This is probably the probability. Like he can think in those regards, but I think he just lacks the like practical application of it in against different types of armies at this point. So he didn't have a lot to be able to, at least he didn't feel like he had a lot to be able to deal with my vehicles. And truth be told, he really didn't. Once I neutered the fire dragons, like that was kind of where it stood. It wasn't quite as bad as when I used to have guys jump back in a Land Raider and a Gene Scissors couldn't get to them anymore. But it was decisive in my favor by the end of the game. That being said, I like playing against armies that I don't play against frequently, and I don't play, other than the Maelstrom Mixer, I haven't played a lot of Eldar, and I haven't seen like what a lot of them can do on the list. And I'm very excited to see.
You're going to play entirely too much of them soon.
I know, but I am, maybe I'll be playing them. I am excited to see what their codex holds, and I'm hoping it comes out in like January-ish. So we'll see.
That's what I'm expecting.
That's my guess.
Eldar.
So that was my game.
Fragile army that it sounds like he was maybe a little bit too forward with them early on, because they really want to pick a couple things off and like choose their battles and then be way more effective late game. Like they are not necessarily an early game army, especially now that Wraith Knights aren't what they were. Because
but at the same time, like I had a lot of stuff on the table that can reach out and touch you at long range, right? So, I mean, but not a. I don't think my list is like incredibly broken or anything. It's not. It's pretty. Actually, there's some pretty big weaknesses in it, but you know, my Beastman lived for like ever in that game. I will say, and I forgot to mention that Avatar of Cain. That guy's a beast. Man.
Yeah, no,
yes, he is.
He's a lot.
He did make his way all the way around the table. I think he was kind of the final unit that Ryan had on the table, and he was just slaughtering stuff with it. I threw Abaddon at the Avatar just to have that battle. Abaddon went back to the battle barge after that. You know,
he retired to the battle barge.
Yeah, but he did a lot of wounds. But man, fights first is brutal too.
Yeah.
Man, those guys.
I'm glad Ryan was able to still get to like work with something instead of just getting like, just slapped around by your Forge Fiend for the whole game. I'm glad the Avatar was able to live up to his name and you know, maybe reap some souls for killing.
Taking half damage from attacks is
so
incredible.
Yeah,
you're basically doubling the number of wounds the thing has.
Right, like you can. I guess this is the Forge Fiend damage 3 or damage 4 with its guns.
3.
Then it's actually rather good for hitting the Avatar because of that.
Yeah, correct.
Halves down to 2.
That's right.
That isn't always going to be available too.
Yeah.
Avatars
I think when I did the most damage again, this is the second time this has happened. Is like, my Vindicator will Overwatch. And then all of a sudden I roll like a punch and it's going to roll all these 6s and geez, Vindicators are brutal. He saw what the Vindicator did and that became like his primary target number 1. And then I had it so spread out from where the Forge Fiend was, you know, it was a bit of a struggle. So it was a good game. It was a good game though.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What'd you play, Josh?
Me and Brian got together down at Herrick Games for a game of Adeptus Titanicus.
Was this on Small Business Saturday?
Yeah. So Sky had the shop open for celebrating Small Business Saturday, which there's I think he's always been open. At least the last couple of years, he's actually had a good game space going. It was actually pretty neat to see a bunch of people who lived in the greater kind of Santa Cruz area actually show up and be like, oh, I had no idea the store was here. And there's like, oh, there's D&D, there's 40K, there's Magic. Yeah. Like it's a really well stocked store. So. And it is not where you'd expect it to be because it's kind of in the middle of the nowhere mountains.
Yeah. And its layout is fantastic.
Yeah, tons of space for games. We got together. We played a really fun game. We used the Open Engine War deck, and we had a fun mix of missions. It was extra heat, so heat on your reactors was harder to vent. It was you vent on a 5 instead of a 4, so reactor management becomes more of a thing in a game. And me and Brian both like to play a little loose with our reactors in general, so it was interesting that we had to conserve ourselves a bit more. But then the primary mission we were playing was basically like it was kind of capture the flag, but you get to walk up and pick up your flag also. They're both kind of towards the middle of the game, which. No real surprise there. We ended up tying on the primary mission because we both picked up, and then everything on the table by the end of the game was dead except for the 2 Titans that had flags. So
awesome.
It was a really fun game, super epic. It was another condition we got out of the Open Engine War was every time you roll the Machine Spirit, it happens. You don't take a command check to see if you can mitigate that, like keep it in check, keep it at bay. So I think the first 7 reactor rolls we had in that game were all Machine Spirits. So Titans were doing nothing of what we had intended them to do. So it was like a really silly start. And we ended up using like stratagems to mitigate I had a Warlord Titan that didn't move out of my deployment zone for the first 2 turns because it was Machine Spirit. What are we doing instead? Machine Spirit. What are we doing instead? We're not moving. And that's, so I ended up having to use my, warp teleportation because my melee Reaver had already been obliterated at that point. Was like, well, I might as well teleport this Warlord just so he can actually get his guns in range because he's not a long range Warlord. And but it was like just silly stuff going back and forth, a bunch of like fun catastrophic chain reactions and multiple Titans going catastrophic, which is always the best part of the game is when everything blows up. Again, you have as much fun when your Titans blow up as your opponent does, which is a great. great game design.
Have you played this game, Campbell?
I have not played Titanic.
Dude, I'm telling you.
I saw you guys playing Adepticon last year or the year before.
Yeah.
And it looked cool as hell. Like it looks.
You mean when we won?
Yeah. When Carl was the face. Josh was
shut up. Yeah, it is. Josh describes
Carl
it well.
won the hearts of the crowd, and I won the game.
And you took their skulls. Yeah.
we did get best sportsman. I'm just saying. Josh describes it really well, though. Even when you're losing, you're like, "This is ridiculous. This is awesome."
I've talked to people. I've basically repeated what you've said to people. Having never played it, just because it's like, oh yeah, when your Titans go down, they'll like freak out and shoot things nearby, and they'll cause like domino effect, and you shout engine kill, or else it doesn't count. It like all that sort of stuff. It sounds like a blast. It really does.
Super fun.
I wish it wasn't kind of abandoned by Games Workshop at this point, but again, it's a complete game. So
it's a complete game. Like we're still playing it.
Complete experience, and it's so enjoyable. Like if nothing ever comes out for it, that game's not going away. Like as far as I'm concerned, I'll keep playing it. Like, it's a really good experience. It doesn't need anything.
That reminds me, the engine blowing up and stuff. I forgot to mention during my game, I failed an astronomical number of
dark packs.
Yeah, and at the point came where he was gonna basically. I think my Vindicator had like 2 wounds left on it, maybe 3, and like. I was going to lose the Vindicator the next turn. Like he was right there. And I was like, dark pack the Vindicator. Oh, blew up my own Vindicator. So it was like, I denied him at least even killing the Vindicator I forgot to mention that in my story. Yeah, it was.
I played a guy at Storm of Silence who was running Iron Warriors, and he was like, "You're not gonna table me. I'm gonna table me.
I'm gonna table me."
He had like a dark pacting, overwatching plasma pistol, like Warpsmith is his last thing.
Amazing.
And, he blew himself up. It was hilarious. Like,
my units
you can't fire me. I quit approach to 40K.
Yes. My units are loaded with plasma too, so I don't care. I'm just like, overcharged. Dark packed, overcharged, fire it all. I'm either going to win big or lose. Anyway, that's awesome. And Brian's stuff is beautifully painted too. So I wish I could have made it up there to the Small Business Saturday, but we had planned to, and then we had a last minute change, so couldn't make it.
It happens.
Yep. All right, Campbell, let's hear the real player talk.
All right, yeah. The competitive 40K sicko has logged on.
I see the pictures and I recognize this unit. So go for it.
Yeah, so these were games 4 and 5 of our competitive league, which is interesting. It's a competitive league, but it was a team-based league, and the teams were like random, quote unquote. I don't think they're that random because they seem to be a lot of 1 experienced player and 2 less experienced players on each, something akin to that.
It's nice.
Which actually was really cool. It means I kind of got to coach 2 of our newer players through a bunch of games, and like between games be like, oh, here's how I'd run this. Here's what you should keep in mind for this mission or this matchup or whatever, which was really cool. Like it was a really cool way to kind of have like new people come into our group and get to like know the old heads who usually just play each other all the time.
Yeah.
Because if someone's like, ooh, I want to get a game. I'm new to 40K. In my mind, I want to be welcoming, but also I'm probably not going to volunteer right away because like, I don't want to beat them into the dirt and make them not want to play the game anymore. It's like, I can pump the brakes, but I've chiefly been playing competitive 40K for the last like 2 years. So
it's hard to turn it off.
It can be really hard to turn it off. And sometimes you start to pump the brakes and you either needed to pump them harder or you didn't pump them enough. Didn't really know.
Swap armies.
Yeah. Actually, honestly, kind of a fun one.
Yeah. Hey, let me tell you how they use that unit against me.
Here's how I'd kill me with that.
Yeah.
But the way this worked was the team captains always played each other.
Okay.
So the team captains tended to be self-selected, so they tend to be the more experienced players. So I got a game with Forrest, who was running his Sisters of Battle, running the Army of Faith detachment. And Sisters are a tough matchup for me and my Templars because they've got a lot of melta-guns. They got a lot of ways to boost their effectiveness, either with miracle dice or things like castigators and immolators, like removing cover or adding AP or whatever. Like they have a lot of things that can really make my big things go down fast. And they have a lot of cheap little units like Seraphim or not neophytes. I don't remember what the scout ones are called, who can move block my melee units or melee units and make it very hard for me to do what I want to do. So going into this, I'm like, all right, this might be kind of tough.
You're really motivating me to paint my sisters.
Sisters are a really good army. Like, there's a reason that the
we'll talk about that in a second. Keep going.
There's a reason the Bringers of the Flame detachment keeps getting hit. It keeps getting made more expensive because it's really good.
Yep.
But he was doing Army of Faith, which isn't quite as, he wasn't trying to go as hard. And turn 1, I move up and I'm like, I do the math. I'm like, he doesn't have like an exorcist. He doesn't have that many melta guns. Screw it. Go put my Land Raider Redeemer dead center on the table. Make him come to me, So just called shot. Everything's on the table. Here we go. I do some damage, nothing too wild. And he comes back at me and he moves up with a suit of his battles or with a squad of his paragons. I overwatch him. I kill 2 of them with a Redeemer. That's pretty dispiriting for him.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
He puts all his shooting into the Redeemer, doesn't kill it. He sends out a unit of Repentia. They fail their charge. He rerolls it. They fail the charge again, and just goes, that's game. It's the bottom of turn 1.
So, his
whole army's out there. He's done nothing to mine, and he like took some wounds off my Land Raider, but I'm like,
okay. That's what they're there for.
That Redeemer's about to go mow the lawn.
And it did. I was like, hey, if you want, we can re-rack and just count this as a win for me if you're really that concerned about this or whatever. He's like, no, let's just play it out. And we did, and it went pretty much how it went how you expected to, because now that all his Repentia are just out in the open, cool, I gun him down with bolt pistols, I charge the stuff behind him. His battle suits are worn down, cool, I can take them out, I can move around, I can kind of get around the board with impunity, I can control all the charges, and I just bulldozed him. Like, I sacrificed the Hellbrick, throwing it at Morphin Vol, just kind of so he would get to do something too, because Morphin Vol is back in his deployment zone.
Is Morphin Vol that good?
She's pretty good.
I have her in my list, so that's why I'm asking.
I think she's good on her own, and she gives +1 to hit and wounds, or full rerolls to hit and wound on a unit of Paragons. Like, she's rather good. That's
pretty solid.
Yeah, and she's like a beat stick in her own right. And of course, like a vehicle and all that. So some keywords don't really key off on her. Like, she's a good unit and a very good force multiplier. I think he made the mistake of not starting her on the board because, cool, you can bring her in as a reserve somewhere, but she has long range shooting. She's pretty fast. You kind of want to maximize her buffs for as long as you can. So keep her on the board. She's tough enough to.
That's an interesting way. That's an interesting way of thinking about that, Campbell. I hadn't really thought about it that way. Like maximizing that as long as you can. I mean, she was probably on a Zoom call with the other High Lords of Terror.
Yeah, she was busy.
I'll be down there in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I don't play Sisters, so I don't really know for sure if that's the right move. But usually when I've played against Sisters armies that have her in there, she starts on the board, and she is a problem for me from turn 1 onwards, as opposed to just kind of coming in on turn 2 or 3 as a mobile reserve. Because Hellbrecht and the Hellbrick, they're not doing stuff turn 1 onwards. They're kind of a fight, one and done. I throw them at the thing that needs to die the most, and they're gone.
And then it dies. Yeah,
it usually dies. In this case, they kind of cut a swath through the army beforehand. But yeah, it was not a very good game. I hate to say. Forest rules. I love that guy so goddamn much, but it was just not a very good game. Yeah. Because that happens sometimes though. And it was
it does. This is why I almost quit dice games when I play Josh sometimes.
Yeah. And his saves were definitely quit dice game worthy. And my dice weren't really hot, but they were still rolling. And it ended up being a 100-20 win for me, which is doesn't feel good. It doesn't.
I've never hit 100 points in a game. Just my highest was in the 70s or 80s.
Yeah, it's I'm not gonna say I hit 100 every time or anything like that, but I've done it a few times. But I've never had a close game be 100 points.
Wow.
Or if it was,
those are all going to be kind of one-sided, I think, at that point, because you're just racking up so many points in their zones and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Unless it was something like, it's close through turn 4, and then on turn 5 you got a bunch of primary or something.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
The problem is Forrest has also been playing, he's been having some trouble enjoying the game. He keeps getting mashed into a bunch of very high pressure melee lists like mine, and they just keep pushing him back. And because we're fixed list throughout this league, he hasn't really been able to adjust. So I think he's probably going to take a break from competitive 40k for a while. I might too, just because I've done a lot of it recently. But I don't know. He and I will play some BattleTech or something soon and have a good time.
Get a palate cleanser.
Precisely. And
Yeah.
after this, I had a 2,000 point game against Nick and his Liberator Assault Group Blood Angels. He had a different bad luck. Before his game, a couple days before, he had one of those MDF trays that he carries his army around in. And he carries it from his car to the store in that. And in his garage, fortunately it was in his garage, the handles on it broke. And one, the MDF snapped and cut his hand open. Two, his whole army hit concrete. And they aren't all painted or anything like that, but still, it's dispiriting just having all your stuff break.
Whenever you start a story with, he carries his army on this kind of tray, you're like, oh, here comes the...
Yeah, no, you wouldn't...
It's they're hitting the ground.
It's so I left my army in my car. Well, that's not going to end well.
Yeah. No story begins, I left my army in my car, and ends with, it was fine.
Yeah. No. And then I came back and it was all painted. I don't know what happened.
It was stolen, but joke's on them. It melted first.
Someone stole my army, but they were all uncured privateer press resin, so it poisoned them. And
public service announcement: never leave your army in the car.
Yeah,
don't do it.
Army cases look too much like toolboxes or things that hold valuable
gun
stuff.
Cases or something that people who steal stuff seem to think, and then it ends up in the trash bin usually. Yep. So please don't leave your stuff.
We did a Goonhammer video about how to transport your models, and one of the things we do in there is if you're get them out of your car because they are very easy looking targets for crimes of opportunity.
Yep.
All right, so this game with Nick and his sadly broken Blood Angels, this is a game where Dante is just an orc corpse floating around on the base. So Dontork.
He is.
Yeah. So his army is all Blood Angels all the time, as it should be, and he just had board control from turn one. They're either in my face or around my face, artfully arranged, where they could take objectives and cause problems for me. And in this battle of two assault armies, he got to control the pace of the game because I had first turn and I was maybe a little more aggressive than I should have been right out the gate. And it just meant he got to make all the charges. I didn't make any charges till turn 4, but he was making charges.
Definitely want the charge too. They are much better on the charge,
right? Because they all have lance and extra attacks and stuff like that. Yeah. And he was just racking up primary score. I was doing really well in secondaries. I was playing a pretty good KG secondary objective game, but I was keeping back. So he was just kind of running around all the primaries in the middle of the table, and I put my Redeemer too far forward and it got wrapped, which for the first time, which it's hard to wrap something that big, but he got it with Dante and a bunch of Sanguinary Guard and a bunch of Assault Intercessors. And I had to desperate escape, which means a bunch of my guys died coming out of it, which sucked. Fortunately, that was the Hellbrick. So at least they were close to an assault, and I did get to charge, and Hellbrecht personally did kill 5 Sanguinary Guard, which was felt pretty good after losing my Redeemer. It's a damage 3 sword that's lethal sussy 5+, so 6 attacks becomes 9 wounds. And he just beefed those invuln saves, but his saves were generally pretty decent after that. And I was when my main assault unit gets kind of cut in half and stranded and put in danger outside of my control, that's already a bad sign. And I was able to kind of shore things up, fight back here and there, but because his army had no vehicles in it, save for 1 drop pod, all my las cannons were kind of not really doing much because my army is built very much to deal with armor, because that's what I usually ran into trouble with.
Right.
Kind of a rock, paper, scissors situation. I brought rock, he brought paper. Or rather, I brought paper, he brought chainsword.
Spoiler alert.
It wasn't going well. And I was getting some bad cards, and I drew Marked for Death, and Marked for Death is one of my least favorite cards in the game. For people who aren't familiar or who are listening later after this card has been put in the paper shredder, your opponent chooses 3 units, and if you kill one of them, you get 5 points. Cool. Your opponent gets to choose them, though. So it's turn 1, I'm going to pick my Tech Marine, who you can't shoot, my Hidden Squad over here, and my Land Raider that you have no means of killing. Good luck.
It has to be on the table, though. It can't be something in reserve.
It can't be in reserves or in transport, but especially if it's early in the game where your opponent doesn't have a lot of means of getting around, you can really just make that a dead draw.
Yeah.
And he chose one of his Sanguinary Guard units that he had hidden, but I had a unit of scouts come out of pick up, put down, come out of a corner, and they moved up, and I had 1 like long distance, like at 24 inches sniper rifle shot. And I did kill a sanguinary guard that was like the guy required to get me that 5 points. And
Nice.
I'm not usually that proud of getting 5 freaking points, but it felt real good. But again, it was a little bit of a rough matchup. Not a great table layout for me because there were no firing lanes anywhere.
Right.
And Nick played super well. Like he knows his army, he knows his list, and he was controlling the game.
Right.
Despite that, it was still really close, and it ended up being a 55-62 defeat for me. So, well,
You know,
that's a close game.
On the point of that, drawing the marked for death card, I've started to become a big fan of ditching a card at the end of my turn if I know, like I'm starting to kind of get the game a little bit more, especially where the card aspect comes in, and getting to the point where if I'm sitting on a card that I'm like, look, maybe I'll score it in the next turn, but probably not. Like I'm just ditching it, and taking my chances with a new card and gaining a command point for selling at the end of my turn. And sometimes I'm command point hungry. So I'm like, my army will use command points as soon as I can get them. So, I've found it to be sometimes not a bad investment, but yeah, Campbell, I typically draw bad.
Getting a bad draw in turn 1 is actually pretty good because
turn 1's the least. Yeah.
Because turn 1's kind of like, it's important for staging and all that, but you're not gonna like take your opponent's home objective turn 1 more likely than not. Like there's only so much you can reasonably do, especially if you're going first.
I think the biggest thing about a turn 1 good draw is if you're able to do both of those against a less like experienced opponent, you can maybe demoralize them a little bit because you're like, look, I'm already leaping ahead, in points, and they're like, oh man. And then they could mentally get themselves on the back foot. But I think if somebody's used to like, yep, okay, I've found my army tends to grind it out, to the end. And then like I overcome usually like, oh, you got points early and then I overtake you. And I've said before, one of the things I'm struggling with is getting guys on to objectives faster. So I'm starting to work on how do I do that a little more effectively. So yeah, man, 2 good games.
Yeah. I had one really good
one
game.
good game, but obviously you like the opponent you're playing with in the other game.
I love both these guys. They're part of our little we have a little like competitive 40K group here, like within our greater gaming group. We're the Codex Creeps. I made merch for us and everything.
The Codex Creeps, that's amazing.
And
that's amazing.
We travel together like local events and stuff like that. And I've gone to events with both these guys before. I've known both these guys for years. They're very good friends of mine. I love playing them, irrespective of the game system.
Where are you typically playing?
So I have played both these games. Were played at Modern Games, which is the very cute little local game store here. Yeah, it's sweet. It's typically more of a board game cafe that does have like a bunch of local beers on draft and has a whole Warhammer section. And very much Wednesday nights are Warhammer Wednesdays. They are like, you need to show up early or wait late because they've been packed,
tables are going to fill,
especially during this league.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
When I started going to this store at like, I moved here at the end of 2020. When I started going to this store in 2021 for like the first game day or whatever, it was like, cool. There are 2 people playing Warhammer in the store and I'm half of them. And now it is like, it's victim of its own success in a way. Like we've almost kind of like outgrown the space in a way because there's too many people to play. But like I brought my terrain from home because the terrain was already taken, or I want someone else to be able to use the store terrain, and it's been going great. Like it's a very active community. It's been growing. We play 40K, Age of Sigmar, BattleTech, Blood Bowl, Infinity, whatever. Like any flavor of miniatures.
That's fantastic.
Tom Taylor Big on our Facebook group was just talking about how their club showed up in a local newspaper, and he had said, oh, we have like 400 attendees. And I said, you have 400, people? No. He said, that's, 400 people, like number of times somebody attends. So like, even if one person attended 4 times, that's a 4 count, right?
Yeah, 400 attendees is a con.
In a month. But I mean, that's a good turnout in a month. I mean, if you think about it, that's still really, really good. Man.
That's some consistent head count per event.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a
That's a
tough
healthy
problem.
community. Yeah.
What a tough problem to have, you know? So
That's how you build. That's how you build local communities. That's how you make lasting friendships. Like
for sure.
Almost every adult friendship I've made has been through this game, and almost every one of those that I've made here was especially through this game. Like that's how I started meeting people here in the first place. So
yeah. Nice.
All right. Well, let's take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll actually get into the topic of our show. I'm hanging out on the Discord channel for the Badcast. I see those guys are like, it's a very long episode. I'm like, yeah,
wonder how it gets that long.
I hear complaints about it occasionally, but the majority of my listeners are like, I like the long episodes. I'm like, all right,
here's the thing: as someone who listens to and occasionally records very long podcasts, you don't got to listen to the whole thing at once.
Nah, taking in chunks, man.
I watched an 8-hour video essay on YouTube about an obscure Japanese dating sim from the 90s or whatever. I'm not watching that in one go. That's my painting background for like a week.
Yeah. I think there was one time we did a 4-hour episode. I was like, never again. We can't release something like that. That's ridiculous. And that's when we started breaking it up into like 2 episodes. I won't put anybody through that.
That's what we've been talking behind the scenes about how we'll do our year in review.
That's right. That will not be a 4-hour episode.
There's too much to cover.
Nope.
There's too much to cover in depth. There's a preview for you.
All right. So we'll take a break. We'll be right back. And then we'll launch into collaborative gaming experiences. Be right back. All right, and we're back, and now we're going to launch the main topic of the show, which is collaborative gaming experiences. And so what do I mean by that? So the first thing I want to do is kind of define what I mean by that, and then we can have the discussion after that. What I mean is that in this context, and in particular around 40K, but this could be any game, literally any miniature game or something along those lines. This can be working narratively together to kind of come up with something, or it could be a team tournament event or something like that, where you are working together with other people to try to create the experience that you're looking for. And I towards the end of the discussion, I think is where I put the team tournament section. But what really got me thinking about that, and I'll start with that a little bit. Campbell, I think you're familiar with this more than Josh and I were, was when I heard about like the 3-person like team tournament thing. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this on the show before where, you have one person playing against 2 people for at least one round. And then you have, it's constantly rotating who's involved in that. And I just thought, what a really interesting idea for a way to play the game. And then it got me thinking about my own experiences with team tournament events. In particular, I've played the team tournament at Adepticon twice. And what went into us setting up, like, what is it we're bringing and what is our objective here at the event? In addition, I've talked on the show about wanting to do like this big battle. Josh and I have been kind of working through some of the details, even scheduling when it is. And we want a theme to it. Like we're like, well, it's really important that we have like this theme, whether it's Necron versus Chaos. Shell wants to play, so we want her to bring her Chaos stuff. I'm going to play Chaos. So we're going through our group. Well, who has Necrons? Who has Eldar? How do we think that will fit in terms of thematically what we're trying to really accomplish for the day? And then going back even a couple more episodes where we talked about events and keeping things less complicated, we immediately were like, well, what if there was like an underground area of the city as well, where you can go down there? And so we immediately complicated it.
It's mechanically simple, but tells a really cool story.
Right.
And that's for this game too. Like we're looking at a large game. Like this is going to be 12,000 points on the table, like at a minimum. Mm-hmm. And for me, like the way I'm thinking about it too is like, let's like set truly narrative objectives. Like points don't matter whatsoever. Like you
Mhm.
get this objective and it does something, almost like an RTS style trigger. Like get to this point, do a thing, something happens.
Right.
It doesn't matter about like points are such an abstraction of the game. We're trying to tell a story. Let's focus on those story elements within the game, and then the story will
Yeah. So, but my point there was, I think that working collaboratively on this, and Josh and I will be on opposing teams, by the way.
Yep.
As we talked about it, we were like, well, what makes like a really good experience here? And you know, even though like, you know, I'm not setting out to be like, well, I think Chaos should start covering 90% of the board, and you know, I mean, like it's what makes this, what will visually look really cool.
Yeah.
And what will thematically look really cool. And that's like
And what's going to be a
collaboratively.
fun game to play for everybody involved.
Yeah. So collaboratively, we're coming up with what we think will be an interesting experience. And so I think that there's, you know, we'll go into discussing like what the appeal of this is, but like, I think fundamentally you have shared goals, you know, let's make sure we're coming to the table with the same objectives, whether it's a tournament or whether it's a you know, a narrative type of situation. I think it helps with camaraderie in the sense that as Josh and I were working through, Josh, what did we land on? Necrons versus Chaos?
Eldar
versus Chaos.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And we're going to have Lars and you and Shell and I. And so what we have is, sorry, Lars, but what we have is like one very experienced 10th edition player with a less experienced 10th edition player kind of on both sides of the fence.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it will help build like camaraderie a bit. It will ease people into the game. You have like somebody you're playing with, and much like Titanicus in a way, Josh, it's one of those things where even if you're losing, like things are going to be happening that make it interesting. Right. And then you have like, go ahead.
Like not even focusing the game around points that way as far as like objectives and points, but like this is a narrative thing. There's a reason to do this. Not here's an abstract point on the board that you need to hang out around to get 5 points. Like, hey, get to the point, have it do something, and have that actually have a small effect. It adds it's a small layer of complexity, but I think it's adding to the immersion. It's adding to the storytelling element, and I should be adding to everybody's fun at the table.
Even
like,
if
right.
Yeah, taking for example, Shell and I have been playing a lot of this game, Cthulhu Death May Die. And sometimes to achieve victory at the end, well, somebody's got to sacrifice himself, you know, and be the one that dies. But there's a certain amount of noble sacrifice in that, you know, and so collectively it kind of generates that thing. And then the other thing is, you know, so you can increase this, as we've been talking about, like a narrative immersion, but also, if you're doing kind of a collaborative or team event, if something goes wrong, you have somebody else to blame. So.
It's important to have that deniability factor.
Or somebody
Lars?
else to latch your wagon to.
Right.
Hence why Josh and I won the Titanicus event at Adept.
Yeah, Carl, as you walked up to get your medal, you look behind you and there was only one set of Titanic footprints in the sand.
Joke's on you, Campbell. There was only one medal.
You don't get to wear it together like a get-along shirt. Now, I think the thing is,
we can.
by setting that boundary ahead of time, like that's what's important. Like you've talked before, I think we talked about it last time we recorded about that old GW campaign book where it's like, oh, it's this battle between Imperium and Chaos, and also the Dark Eldar are here, I guess. Setting that ahead of time, it means you can tell more.
Phil Kelly.
Yeah. It does mean you can tell a more contained story. You're setting you're setting the narrative boundaries for it. You're setting also in a way like the power level boundaries for it too. Yeah. I feel like if you're doing a cooperative narrative event, especially at this level, I feel like having some sort of list checking is important. Now, in your case, like the four of you, you know each other. You're probably all coming in there with the same sort of expectation. But if you're bringing in anybody else, like you don't want to be like, all right, here's my special character, Carlos Tutulus, and the second company of Ultramarines, where every guy has a name, and it's 5 intercessor squads and 3, it's like a battle company, and the guy next to you has the most beat face, brutal tournament list you've seen in your entire life. Like, you kind of need to make sure you're on the same page here.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I feel that by organizing your own little event like this, you're able to author that experience in a way you wouldn't if it was more opened up.
Correct.
We're catering the experience. Like, we'd even talked about doing a like sheet hidden deployment just for fun because it's a fun experience.
Yes, it is.
But when we do have a disparity in player level and experience, we're like, what if that inadvertently
creates a situation
where like a less experienced player especially is now getting teamed up on, and we have no idea. Like, it wasn't intentionally done one way or another. It's like maybe we try to just avoid that so we can, intentionally deploy to prevent that situation from happening.
I really do want to do that someday,
but I also want to try that.
I've done it before. It is very fun. It is also, it can be very fun. It can be very funny. It can occasionally be kind of a wet fart as your armies just end up in corners across from each other.
Yeah.
Because you both have the same refused flank idea and nobody does anything.
Both should bun chickens.
Yeah, it's the old 5th edition auto tie back in force.
Yep.
But a lot of what brought us to this point, and Campbell, you raised a really interesting point. So we're talking cooperative narrative right now. What brought me to this kind of stage, and honestly, what was kind of the inspiration for, God, I really want to do something like this, was you and Dan talking, and I've said this before, about the difference between, arriving at a competitive event, everybody has the same mindset. It's try to win, right? As Jeff used to say, winning is a theme.
I still say my army's fluff is that they win.
Yeah. and saying, I agreed with you guys. I was actually, they're right. Like, everybody has a different idea of what's narrative. So I think easily contained within 4 players is, let's sit down and talk about, or guys and gals in this case, let's sit around and talk about what do we think we're trying to achieve here. And Josh and I are kind of spearheading like the ideas and then kind of bringing them along and saying, okay, here's kind of what we're thinking, and see what their thoughts are.
Well, this summer I played in a BattleTech sort of like, it wasn't necessarily like super narrative, but it was very much an authored sort of game. Like, it was this sort of like free for all, keep what you kill. Everybody brings, does blind. It was a draft, and you do some mechs, and this sort of like, by having this sort of GM'd experience, it got to be very much actually what Forrest, the guy who was playing Sisters, it got to be what he wanted it to be. And as a result, everyone had a very good time because we all came looking for that experience, and we got that experience. So he's looking to do another sort of like narrative, event sort of thing like that. I think having a GM for this sort of thing is very handy. In y'all's case, again, it's 4 of you.
I kind of wish we had one though, because then they could throw like little.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to suggest here, though. Is
you coming down? Is that what you're suggesting?
I would love to. I don't know what it is, but or when I'm available, but I would love to. But the whole idea of having a GM there for a narrative thing is so you can kind of like actively balance or actively imbalance in a fun way if you super need to. Because, excuse me, if on turn 1. Team 1, they just got totally just shellacked,
destroyed
with shooting, and they've got 1,000 points left on the board. If you're the GM, you can be like, oh, cool, well, you get reinforcements, or a smoke screen comes down on the board, or you get, or something from high command. Maybe ahead of time, this is something where you, as the organizers, can put together sort of like, almost like a AI flowchart sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, one team is this far behind, this happens, or something.
We can have a few pre-scripted contingency plans.
It's not a bad idea.
Pretty much.
Not a bad idea, actually. That's a good suggestion, Campbell. That's a really good suggestion, Campbell.
So I think it's what I would do if I was trying to do something like this. When I've played like Necromunda campaigns and so on, and things kind of got, maybe a gang was getting a little too big for their britches, we might kind of come together and be like, all right, what can we do to kind of make this interesting for other players? Because, the team, my gang of murder, death, kill guys versus all you poor schlubs with your pipe pistols are just, it's not really a fun game anymore. So having,
and in this case, it's also kind of one of those things where the theme was so important to us. We joked about the Phil Kelly Dark Eldar in was it Crusade of Fire? Was that
Crusade of Fire?
Yeah. We joked about, him bringing, I think originally it was a Chaos versus Imperium?
I thought it was Chaos versus Imperium.
I think it was Chaos versus Imperium, and then all of a sudden these Dark Eldar show up out of nowhere because Phil Kelly had a fully painted Dark Eldar army. He wanted to play Dark Eldar, which really breaks the theme all of a sudden. But of course, they didn't want to leave Phil Kelly out, probably for a number of reasons. One, they probably all like him and he is very likable, but two, we got a designer and one of the studio writers here.
Don't alienate your best rules writer.
Yeah, right. Don't alienate him. But in this case, theme was very important to us. And so we settled on Eldar versus Chaos, where we were like, of the number of players available for Eldar, who do we have? And then, it turned out, well, one of the Eldar players is also Shell, who's playing Chaos. So that doesn't work. But it was like, what other groups do we have that have like a large swath of available armies for these teams? And we come from, honestly, a gaming group that everybody has at least 2 armies, if not more. And so, again, I don't think we would, at this stage, based on what we're thinking and narratively, allow like, and then the Necrons show up. That has nothing to do with what we're trying to accomplish. And so we don't want to muddy the waters. We want to have a pretty clean, you're going to have a clean fight, as they say in boxing.
A good clean fight.
Unless on turn 3, Aaron shows up with his Necrons, and it's like the end of Dawn of War Dark Crusade or
that's right,
or Assault or whatever. And then that's part of the narrative, and it's coming.
That's right.
But yeah, no, that's...
You might wake him up in that subterranean board we have planned.
But I did that once during a narrative thing that I ran, and it didn't go over terribly well either. Like it just didn't. I think I was also kind of junior doing this kind of thing at the point.
For sure.
But I think I would just like, it's complicated enough, especially we've added the Undercity area, and we're figuring out how to make that work. But because we got to use my Zone Mortalis tiles a bit.
Of course.
So then, this is kind of, I would classify this as kind of a multiplayer kind of mega battle situation that we're running here. But I also played in one of these at one of the first Bay Area Opens.
Big Jim stuff.
Big Jim would run this. And that was also, I believe, Chaos versus Imperium type of situation that he laid out. And
then some Necrons on the side.
Was there?
There were. I'm trying to remember who was playing Necrons, but there were Necrons.
But the interesting thing about that, this was the first time I saw something run at an event like this.
Yeah.
And we were all across the table from each other playing this game, and Forge World units were allowed. This was back when like a Forge World unit, like a super heavy would explode and destroy terrain around it and everything. And
that Beyblade in the middle. I remember that game very vividly.
Yeah.
This is a fifth edition, like the height of 5th edition.
I took it out with an obliterator. And so, I mean, I saw this kind of epic battle run really, really well, where you had multiple players on both sides. But there are logistic problems to that too. I have played at a Games Workshop store. I remember playing an Apocalypse game at a Games Workshop store at one point, and I was playing Tyranids. I was with a whole group of people playing Tyranids against whatever, and the problem became like people getting out of sync on turns. And then it was like, Josh and I talked about this with a separate battlefield, meaning the Undercity. Like, we need to make sure like we're all playing turn 1, everybody's doing their things. Then we're all playing, our turn 2, and you have to slow things down. Now with 4 people, it's not that hard, but with a dozen people, it becomes a little more complicated, especially if some players play faster than others.
So when I've done the Nova narrative, and actually when that was run by the Philadelphia area gaming enthusiast guys, Colin and Joe, when they would run those, they would run them like clockwork. Same when
you have to.
Yeah, you really do. They would have, I don't think they had a projector at Nova, but when I went to Philly for one of their events later, they did. They basically are like, okay, turn 1, moving, side 1, timer starts now. You have 35 minutes. Or whatever. You have like the invitation to, if you have things you can do that don't affect the rest of the table, do them now. If you're on the north corner of the table and you've got a melee to fight, the people in the south are still shooting, who cares? Just do your melee right now. Like, do that right now, because that's the only way you're going to get things done. And when they'd say, okay, movement is over, if you haven't moved, nothing, you're done. That's all you can move. So you have to kind of plan accordingly. So when I did these, I'd bring knights or a lot of guys in vehicles so I can just move stuff easily. I had planned for it. Also, I had to travel. So, you want to bring stuff that you can travel with really well. But you need to have that, honestly, irrespective of narrative, you need to have some sort of GMing just to make sure the game finishes. Because like the best part of an apocalypse game is when you set everything up, look at it, take pictures, go, wow, look at all this stuff. The second best part of an apocalypse game is when you go home.
I agree.
Like it's a slog. It's kind of a slog.
It is such a bummer that the new Apocalypse did not.
It was so cool.
It was so good.
So cool.
We played one game of it. Really enjoyed it. And but I also understand why GW didn't continue to support it. I mean, the reality is not very many people have Apocalypse-size armies in the grand scheme of the number of players that they have. And so it's probably not a big seller in the long run.
I really think it is something that can live it should just live as a PDF or something like that. Having that simplified version of the game for large scale games is really cool. And the new Apocalypse, for those who missed it, which very easy to miss, it was on sale for like 6 months, was basically kind of like epic Legions Imperialis style abstraction, blast markers, stuff like that. So you could actually play these games pretty quickly. I had some friends who actually played 40K with the Apocalypse rules, like 40K sized armies in Apocalypse, and had a very good time with that. But with these multiplayer mega battles, it is a logistical problem. Problem sounds mean, but it's a logistical issue as much as it is just playing a game. So you've got to make sure people are there on time, do their stuff on time, make sure they eat, make sure they have access to bathrooms and like stuff like that. Schedule breaks if you want to have those.
It really all comes down to setting expectations, right? I mean, and that's expectations in terms of, Josh, one of the first things I said, when we were talking about setting this up, I'm like, this is going to be like an all day thing. Like this is going to be like 10 hours of gaming. Like we got to, everybody getting involved needs to understand that right from the
set up, gameplay, tear down. Well, the four of us, we'll see, but we've got the room, though. Right? But
we've got the room to set it up like day before, 2 days before but then we should plan for. And I'm kind of thinking of this as we're talking about. We should plan for like, we're going to do lunch at this time, and we'll do dinner at this time. And we'll have it delivered by such and such,
Award ceremony at the end. I need another medal.
I'll get you one.
Perfect. A lot of what you guys were talking about was reminding me of the G3 Santa Cruz events we would run, which were highly, highly narrative driven. But when we had the big showcase events, we had like 18 to 24 players on average for, I think, the 3 events that we ran. But they were also like trying to synchronize things. Like if something was happening in a game that was taking in place on a like Space Hulk spaceship, we wanted that to trigger an effect that would happen on a table down below. So having this was Scott, like Scott was synchronizing everybody and making sure. And even if games got slightly out of track, like asynchronous, he would at least be checking in more of a GM style of like, hey, what happened over here? Did this trigger over here? Okay, now I'm going to go interrupt the game on this table and be like, this just happens. Like this orbital bombardment falls from the sky now because your allies on the ship are doing this thing. But having that extra layer of like a GM to keep games on track as much as possible, but then also kind of run that narrative interference to tie the bigger kind of group alliance feel together.
But even going back to like the collaborative discussion, like those G3 events were not one-man shows. Like it wasn't just Scott running the whole thing. Like everybody got together to say, okay, we are going to build this Space Hulk thing. This is all way long before like you could buy this terrain that is hand built. We're going to build the Space Hulk. We're going to get enough terrain together. Okay, we need people to paint terrain. Right now and this can be taken to like the nth degree. We're talking about collaborative gaming. I mean, cons kind of fall into that category. I'm part of the Adepticon painting team, the guys that get, all the stuff prepped for Adepticon. And I'm in a chat and I'm watching like everybody shows up to Hank's house. They schedule like way in advance. Okay, who's going to be here this weekend? You go to Hank's house, man. He's got like a garage, external garage out back that's fully dedicated to 40K stuff, a U-shaped set of tables with like air compressors and paint, airbrushes hanging down from the ceiling so that you're using like, it's crazy. I mean, there's got to be at least 14 paintbrushes active at any
like
time.
an auto body shop.
40K terrain sweatshop.
Dave Taylor's there, Jake's there, like all these guys are there, and you sit down and they're like, okay, we need to get all this Marvel Crisis Protocol stuff painted. And so collaboratively, everybody's like, okay, well, I'll do the airbrushing. Hey, can you guys do all the trim on these things? And it's amazing. I think the thing I love about collaboration, and I've always been somebody who's into teamwork, whether it was my previous military experience, whether it was playing EverQuest. That was one of the things I loved about EverQuest. You couldn't really, for the most part, play that game alone. You needed a team. Was watching the Adepticon thing kind of come together as a group, and like so many people dedicated to making sure that the experience that people had there was a fantastic one. And after my first time going there and like helping paint stuff and sitting next to Dave while we were painting stuff and just having great conversation, they're watching like terrible movies on TV, like Chuck Norris's Delta Force and stuff like that. Like, and it's just such a camaraderie building experience, and then walking around with Shell going, oh, see that piece of terrain? I painted that. See that? I painted that, and it's just incredible when you think about it. And that's one of the things, like, I think as we talk about collaboration is like, if done correctly, you can achieve greater results than you can individually. And Scott was a huge driver of the Gothamos Gaming Group in Santa Cruz. Yes, I think there's always kind of somebody who really, one or two people really drive something, but then getting the other people involved and making them feel like they're helping, just in the end, you lead to a much bigger thing than you think could have been possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And these were always like the kind of capstone events on a campaign that we had been running for a while. So it was a really nice kind of escalation up to this point. We'd all been collaboratively telling a story, but then we open up the group for like, okay, then now let's like have this really kind of showcase event where we bring people who maybe weren't even participating in the event, but we want to make it feel even bigger and that much more. But yeah, it was definitely the entirety of our community, our local community, was rallying around these events for terrain painting and storytelling and web design, graphic design, narrative elements, things like that. So it was a fantastic time.
I mean, so usually the times I see like pitfalls here are when people either try to take on too much alone.
Yeah.
So like you said, even if there is one person driving it, they need to have some lieutenants running around who can help them bounce ideas off, figure what's realistic or not. Because when one person is having ideas on their own, that's often, I think, when ideas exceed their grasp or whatever. And you end up with like, oh, I want to have it be this big, extremely huge, cool thing. It's like, well, you're one person. How much terrain do you really think you can paint in time for this? Or whatever. And the other half is when people kind of like try to make this every game or happen too often, because like as the capstone for a league, capstone for a campaign, capstone for just like once a quarter we do a big game like this. Awesome. You can kind of mark your calendar around it. If you don't make it a big kind of rare event, I feel like, I don't want to say it loses its magic, but I feel like that's how it'll be harder to get people to commit to it. That's how you get people who might end up burning out on it or whatever. So yeah, I think by having it be an event, I think that's how you really make these things kind of work.
Yeah, 100%. And we have like an outline here that we're supposedly working from. And
allegedly,
as I looked at the outline to go, okay, so where are we? I'm like, oh, we're all over the place.
We are all over the place. Yeah,
I think that's totally fine. Let's go back to like initially we were going to talk more narrative, and then in the latter half talk like competitive,
yeah,
kind of all over the place. Narratively speaking, obviously, as Josh and I are putting this thing together, we also want to have like kind of a story behind it that doesn't sound too bad. It doesn't involve Carlos Tuttlus, which again, Aaron Dembski-Bowden called the stupidest Space Marine name he'd ever heard. Who, by the way, I'll tell you off air about some conversation I'm having with him. But I think the other thing is we want to set this narrative, but we also for we don't want to constrain it so much. Like, I think we want to make it where, as Josh was talking about, not having just, oh, you get these points for getting on these objectives, but these things happen, which leads to kind of a thing where players are taking actions that begin to shape kind of the story that takes place. And, I think one of the best examples of this I saw, one of the things that really inspired me in 40K and in particular to do my Death Guard, was there was a battle report in a White Dwarf, which you want to talk about guys that did a great job of setting a narrative to
best to
like
ever do it.
yeah, to like effectively a competitive campaign. And it can be argued here or there whether, they shaped the outcome of the game, which they absolutely did.
The thumb was very firmly pressed on the scales, but it made for a good story. Made for some really good articles. So who cares how true it is if it makes for a good story? Right.
And I think I read at one point they had said, oh, what they would do is they would play actually multiple games to kind of get the outcome that they wanted. But I'm like, okay. One of the videos I saw in there had this beautiful city terrain laid out. It was a ruined city with a cathedral. We kind of talked about this, and I thought we were talking about the same one, but I think we were talking about a different one. And it was Imperial Guard versus Death Guard. And this is where my whole joke about Abaddon or whoever my commander is going back up to the battle barge, because at one point Typhus gets killed, and they're like, well, he teleported back up to the battle barge. But the theme they set in that presentation was so good, and the story they told as the game progressed, because it wasn't, again, just about getting on these objectives. They had set like, oh, well, if they can take the cathedral and hold this area, they can accomplish the objective. We saw this in, I think, 4th edition when the Tyranid versus Space Marine box start set that came out. They showed a huge battle at one point, and I remember there was that figure you would get with that set that was like carrying like the briefcase kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was like the guy running with, and they were like, oh, this guy needs to make it to the shuttle and get off the shuttle. And it's objectives like that I think will drive kind of a narrative thing, as Josh was talking about earlier, as opposed to points. So I think we'll play around with a few ideas on what we can do there so that both parties, regardless of quote unquote points, feel like they're accomplishing things in the game.
Yeah. So I've played Warhammer with my wife a few times, and she's primarily an RPG player. So when we played a game of Age of Sigmar, we're duking it out, and I'm like, okay, I just say like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm ahead on points. Like I've got 13, you've got 2. And she goes, why do I care about these discs?
Right.
And I'm like,
yeah.
Well, they're the objective. She's like, well, why do I care? I want to kill your guys. I'm like, okay. And yeah, she killed all my guys. I got more points, but she killed all my guys. So
Campbell, I struggled with this when I first started playing 40K, because I too came from an RPG background, heavy. Like I used to run D&D games every weekend for my group, eight players. And it was 2nd edition. We ran 8-player for years. And so as we started playing this, there was like this point where I remember I had a squad of Space Marines like on a 2nd floor or something. And I'm like, or on a ledge. And I'm like, hey, let's just roll. And if, we roll a 5 or 6, they take a wound, on the way down
or whatever.
And my opponent was like, well, no, I want to understand what the rules are. Let's look up the rules. And I was just like, oh yeah, I guess this is a different kind of game. Like it took me a serious mindset adjustment, because I truly am a narrative player, to the point where I think one of the reasons I like chaos, and one of the reasons I don't mind losing, is as a DM, I'm so used to throwing monsters at my opponents that are meant to be killed.
Yeah. And
I'm like, yeah, you're supposed to win. You're the heroes or whatever. That when I lose, I'm like, okay, good guys won. Okay, that's what. Or
like,
good. Get you next time, Gadget.
That's right.
Yeah, precisely. But I do think though, having those more varied objectives, where it is like, okay, let's say you've got 3 objectives. You need to like shut down, the artillery like barrage. You need to extract the VIP, and you need to hold the ammo, like the ammo dump. and whatever side accomplishes 2 out of 3 wins. You know,
I gotta take a note.
I really like narrative objectives that are asymmetrical like that, so that you can still accomplish things, and it makes a difference in how the game plays out. And like the points don't matter, like the game plays how it plays, but both sides are contributing to that story and contributing to their side's cause, and having a good time doing it, and then like just let the game play out from there, and see what happens. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and it's one of the things where, the same as the people who write a lot of these missions, like there's inspiration everywhere. Like, cool. That's just the Guns of Navarone, for starters.
Right. Yeah.
And then that's, any extract the VIP mission from a Call of Duty game or whatever. Like, you can put these things together, no problem, or hold out in this place for so many turns, and then a relief column shows up, which used to be a standard mission in 4th edition when it was a very different game. But again, it was one that had kind of that narrative baked into it. Like, there are a lot of ways you can do a narrative mission that isn't just, okay, we've got a story framework around me scoring more points than you.
Josh, I wonder if we couldn't come up with, so talking about collaboration, like, it'd be interesting. There's 2 options here. Like, we could come up with entirely different objectives for both teams so that a tie is actually possible. Right. Yeah. Meaning a Pyrrhic victory for both sides is actually possible. Or the minute you throw like an objective in there that both sides are trying to achieve, well, now somebody's going to win or lose. So if it's, we got to take out the gun emplacement. So we should give some consideration to how we want it to play out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could it be possible that we both win and lose, or should we have something where it's a little more definitive by the end? But I do like just as Campbell was talking about the gun emplacement thing. Boy, I'm on my second drink. Is it warm in here? It's just me.
Well, that gun emplacement thing is what I'm thinking about, because there was, I think it might have been the same White Dwarf you're talking about, or a different one where they ran some kind of cool multi-game thing where, like, if you captured the gun emplacement, you get to like drop an ordnance template on this other table or whatever. Not that we need to go that far, but you can be like, all right, cool. If I have the gun emplacement, could be just be a command console. You get to do.
You're going to do a thing.
You get to do. We are only going to play 5 turns, right? So.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. But it's like, okay, if you have this thing, cool. You can do a little mortal wound bomb here or there or something like that, or use a free basilisk attack.
That primer I sent over your way, Carl. Like it was location based. So like in the sewers, there's a relic that somebody's hunting for. If you get the relic, you do the thing. Up top in the city, there's an Imperial Guard barracks. If you take the barracks, you're either like, as Chaos, you are corrupting them and turning them into cultists, and they're going to come and join and fight for you. Or as the Althari, like, you're enlisting the local guard to like why are we saving your city? Like, get your Monkai butts in line and help us out. So like, and maybe like a unit of 20 guardsmen like joins whichever side, or 20 cultists.
That's an interesting. Like that. It's an interesting idea. Yeah.
How I was thinking for those kind of narrative triggers, and like, it's an objective, but something happens, and then it should help contribute to the story one way or another.
I love that idea. Yeah. I love that idea. You know what's funny, Campbell? You'll probably laugh at this. Like, as I got into 40K, I'd never played a miniatures game before. I mean, I played RPGs with miniatures, but never like a miniatures game.
Right.
And I had no concept of like how they are played out. Like, I thought you just played until one team wasn't on the table anymore, or like I does it play out for 12 hours? I have like no concept. So, it's interesting to have watched it distilled down a bit from when I joined in 4th edition. I remember getting to the end of missions and I'd just be like, Jason, tell me who won. Like, it was so confusing how you can't, if these units are half, their unit, then they count for this, and it's just like, oh my God, this is so confusing. To now it's a very defined, encapsulated, like 5 rounds, but back then it was, I think you played 5 rounds, you rolled to see if it went to a 6th round. It could even go to a 7th round.
Right. And if you were like Imperial Fists, you had to stick around for an extra turn, whether
that's right
or not. Like, which makes it impossible to kind of like be like, let's set aside 3 hours for a game. What if we need?
I mean, 4 hours. I mean, 5.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've kind of beat the narrative brush a bit. I think, the last thing is, as always, you want clear communication among the people involved. You want to make sure they watch the videos you produced, right, Josh?
Yeah.
And read the packets. In this case, it's small enough. And remember, you're dealing with gamers, myself included, who, were at best a lazy lot of people who only want to do what we want to do at any given time. And so we may or may not have read the rules. So again, this leads back to our keep it as simple as possible, or at least as bullet pointed as possible, so that for the people who haven't read the rules when they arrive, you can quickly summarize those.
Yep.
Now Campbell talked about a couple episodes ago, a guy who pulled the like Van Halen thing where he's like, people got extra points if
the rider.
Right. Yeah.
What was it he did,
if
Campbell?
at the like the last line or like second to last line in his like event packet or for league packet, change your profile icon on Discord to be sanguineous, so I know you read this. And I'm just like, well, I feel like sanguineous is their icon. Weird.
That's so
I
good.
didn't read the one for this next one either. So
did a new model come out for sanguineous or something? I don't know. I don't play Blood Angels. I don't care.
Yeah, just big Blood Angels fans here, I guess. Yeah. So having something like that, it's easier when there's 4 of you, because when there's 4 of you, you can just be like, hey, here's the high points.
Let's have a conversation.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Let's have a conversation. Yep. Don't, if you can help it, don't do a presentation. No one wants to sit through a work meeting on their day off. But
we did sit through a presentation on Scott's G3 event,
yep.
But there was like 24 people there. I mean, it was like
you kind of need to at that point. But I do think that having like a rules pack that just has, if it only says like, here's a couple sentences of the stakes and of the setup for the battle, and here's the schedule, the end. That's all you need. Just need to know where are we fighting, who is fighting who, and why, and when is lunch. I think that's really what's important.
That's the most important.
The essentials.
Yeah. All right. So let's do this. Let's take a short break. We'll come back and then we'll talk about collaborative kind of competitive situations where we're talking more collaborative tournament type events. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back and we're continuing our conversation around collaborative gaming. And again, as I said at kind of the top of the show, one of the things that kind of spurned this was that 3-person tournament type thing, where it was just a unique approach. And then I have played in team tournament events at Adepticon as well, and we've done like team events at the house where you and another person are playing team games and that kind of thing. That's a little more ad hoc than what I'm talking about, though. So let's talk about team tournaments and why I label these under kind of collaborative events. And what I mean by that is, if the 3 of us plus somebody also good other than me, so and Justin, let's say Justin.
Sure.
So I'm the weak link in the party. If the 4 of us were going, okay, we're going to go to the Adepticon team tournament, and collaboratively they have already set the stage for us, right? Here's how the event works. You're each going to rotate through playing different opponents. You're going to have a team game, whatever the layout of the event is. We know that going into it. And so collaboratively, we as a team need to say, okay, how are we going to approach this thing? And that sounds, I think it's a lot easier in sound than it is in practice, because let's use Adepticon's team tournament let's continue this example. There's a number of things that you're graded on there. You're graded on how you do competitively. Do you win the event? Do you score high? You're graded on theme very heavily, and you're graded on presentation, meaning paint and all that as well. So you have, including your display board function. So if the 4 of us were saying, okay, we're gonna take part in this event, where do we even start that discussion? I have talked to teams there that are like, one guy painted the whole thing. I'm like, you guys are insane. Or
Two
at least
of you
that
are
guy
bad friends.
That guy, yeah.
Three of you are terrible people, and that guy deserves an award. And then I've talked to teams who have broken up the whole thing like a project plan, right? Mm-hmm. Which the project planner in my DNA, having been a project manager, like that's how I would think to approach something like that. But even before we start the actual work, we have to discuss like, well, what are we going to play? Like, what's the army we're going to bring? Do we want to chase the meta? If we're chasing the meta, do we have those armies, or do we need to buy them and build them and paint them? And how do we get all that accomplished so that it looks like, are we, or do we not care about the theme? And we're going to play, Josh is going to play Blood Angels, and I'm going to play Eldar, and Campbell's going to play, Black Templar, and Shell's going to play Chaos. I
can think of 3 things off the top of my head here, because the Adepticon team tournament it's a special thing. It's its own thing. It has the display boards people roll out are akin to parade floats. It is it is Mardi Gras, not just because of the floats, but also because the sheer amount of day drinking going on there. But I think about one year, I saw my a couple of friends of mine, like Pat, JD, and third guy, all played Ultramarines, and they all wore togas. They all had Ultramarine armies. They were on a display board with similar basing. They'd hand out their army lists to players in little parchment rolls, like a wax seal, the whole thing. They went hard into it.
That's
By day
fantastic.
3, one of them had a mono eye, and he was like, I'm so freaking tired of wearing this. I cannot wait to get it off. But they went all in. Then I think about disparate armies. I saw one where it was I think it was like a 2-tiered table where on the top was Tyranids and Marines fighting each other, and underneath was Gene Stealer cults running through the sewers. And it looked really good together. And of course, again, they had this gorgeous big display board thing. The sheer number of those display boards that are in the dumpster behind the hotel afterwards is freaking heartbreaking, but that's just what it is. And that was a thematic put together thing. These 3 people came together for this theme. And then I think about the guys from the Cruise Shaken podcast, who are a couple guys out of Philly, and at Nova one year for the trios, they had 3 very different armies with no unified theme. So what they did was they had, I think one of them was playing Eldar, one was playing Admech, one was playing Chaos, let's just say. Right. They had 3 boards that were the same size with a warp gate leading from one to the next, which, you know what, that's a good way to cheat it. I
appreciate the out of the box thinking.
Yeah, the creativity there I appreciate, but
Webway fixes everything.
Exactly. Mass Effect particles. They explain everything. So there's a lot of different ways you can do those sorts of team sort of things like that. And then I think beyond that of just my friend Peter, it was Peter, his brother, and their friend Eric. He's my friend too. I don't want to say their friend. Anyway, they did the Nova trios, and their theme was Team Comfort Slam, where they had armies that were not themed together at all. They're just their own armies. They're not no co-display board, nothing of the sort.
Just brought what they had
that they liked to play, but they wore lounge robes, and they gave out goodie bags to their opponents, and they just brought a chill vibe to every single game they played. And that was kind of their theme. Yeah, their theme was just, we're chill, let's chill. And that went over well because they're great dudes. Sure. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of go about doing these sorts of collaborative approaches, going from the hard cosplay route where you match your armies to just, we're just a couple.
Everybody's wearing Space Marine armor.
Yeah.
Can you imagine wearing that all day?
That's involved.
Every once in a while I see someone wearing Space Marine armor playing a game.
It's crazy.
The narrative grand finale they just did. I feel like I saw a picture of someone wearing Space Marine armor trying to roll dice, and man, I can't imagine. I don't think I could roll dice wearing the gloves I wear to shovel my driveway. Let alone
roll my dice, brother.
Yeah, actually, if I brought along a game surf, maybe they could do it for me.
There you go.
You got a dice rolling servitor.
Yeah, just wouldn't tell them how to play the game.
But I'm gonna guess those guys didn't win best theme if there even was one. Right?
No.
And so I think like right from the get-go, you have to figure out what is it you're trying to get out of this event, right? Collaboratively, like what do we want to do? Do we want to go for the whole thing, like theme and, try to win? And I mean, I think the Renaissance, Renaissance gamers like we're going to do the best theme and we're going to try to win games and we're going to, do what have you. And we're going to be, fun to play. So we also win best sportsmanship or what have you. It's difficult to pull off. A lot of time, like I realized I wasn't like the best gamer, in terms of the players on the table. And so I would go for like the best painted or, best sportsmanship. And that's why I frequently joke, but I half serious about it. I think best sportsmanship is actually the best award to walk away from that table with. For me, it is, would I love to win a tournament? Yeah. It'd be cool, I guess, but I would be more proud if like everyone was like, I had a great time playing it. So if you're approaching something like that, let's say hypothetically, we have the 4 individuals we're talking about, the 3 of us and Justin, like the first thing we have to decide is, okay, what is it? What's our objective here? If our objective here is to just win, we may focus an entirely different way. Well, these 2 armies work really well in concert together if they're on the table, and these don't, so we'll leave those ones out. If our objective was, more than anything, we really want to win the best theme, how are we going to get from the West Coast to Milwaukee a hive ship that floats 8 feet above the table and has blinking lights, representing the tentacles that it's, sucking up biomass from the planet from? That was, quite frankly, one of the coolest things I ever saw.
Amazing. Hopefully you live close by.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way to get it there unless you're shipping it or driving, right?
Yeah, so drive a U-Haul across.
That's why Cheyenne and I this year for the longboard doubles, our theme was Team Fist Bump with Blood Angels and Necrons, alluding back to that Codex moment. We had T-shirts with it was a really simple theme, and like we played it out. It didn't take it too seriously, and
it's kind of an inside joke, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, cheeky. One of the funny things at Gen Con this year, I don't know if you heard, was the year before, a huge amount of Magic the Gathering cards were stolen, like from the vendor, like a pallet of these things. It's like $30,000-$40,000, maybe $50,000 worth of Magic the Gathering product. And this year, like a couple guys showed up dressed up like the guys who had stolen the stuff, dragging like a wagon that was made up like a pallet with boxes with like Magic the Gathering cards like falling out of it, just to walk around pretending to. Yeah, it was just fantastic, right? So that theme that they clearly collaborated, they're like, oh, this would be really funny if we did this. And I thought it was hysterical.
I think on the other kind of part of this is when it comes to the actual like matchup side of things.
Right.
Because I kind of just mentioned I was in this competitive league where it was players of mixed experience in each little like team. And my team, High Marshal Helbrecht's Hexagrammic Hot Tub Party, was myself, another Templar player, and a Thousand Suns player. And what would happen is...
Hexagrammic.
Each week, I'd kind of be talking with the team captain of the other team, and each captain would kind of have their own sort of priorities. So there might be someone who's like, okay, I'm here because I want my team to win. And I'd be like, all right, cool. Who's your, obviously we're the captains, we're playing each other. Who is your stronger player, would you say? Right. And then I might be like, okay, I think this would be a really good matchup for this person. And we just kind of work that out and go like, okay, yeah, that'd be a good game. This would be a good matchup for this, that, and the other thing. And then the next week I'd play with somebody and they'd be like, okay, I'm just looking for what's a good cultural fit. This player, right. I think they'd really benefit from playing Michael. I think they'd learn a lot and they'd have a really good time at the same time. So you're kind of like finding the goals of these players person by person. And when you're doing a team tournament or a narrative like the Nova narrative and you've got your old battle groups, a lot of that is kind of delegating who's playing who.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
That was always one of my favorite kind of parts about doing those things would be like, okay, we've got our two groups coming up against each other and someone would be like, who wants to play Knights? I'm sorry, I brought Knights, guys. Who wants to go against Knights? And you kind of do that. This was back when Knights were wicked good, not now where they're just kind of equal with everybody else.
Yeah.
And you just kind of go back and forth that way. And I find that to be a very collaborative way to make sure you're both having a good time. Even if the story isn't really what matters, you're both kind of being like, okay, who's experienced? What is a good matchup for these players? And you're just kind of trying to facilitate people having a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. The year I went to Nova on my own, Campbell, and I played in the narrative event. It was one where that year they had like little markers that represented like citizens on the table too. And they, our team came up against another team, and it was like, all right, who wants to play against Custodes? Because at the time, like Custodes were just like, everybody was saying they weren't fun to play against. I had brought like a Zeech Demon and Thousand Suns army, so I was like, fine, I'll play him. And I ended up like doing really well in that game against all odds.
Yeah, that's all, as long as you go off meta and it works for you. Yeah,
my Lord of Change was just slaughtering Custodes. I was like, oh, well, this is great, you know. And it was like, but I fully anticipated, you know, for the team. I was like, I'll be the sacrificial lamb here, and maybe the guy's great, you know, to play with. And he was super fun to play against. But yeah, you raised some really, really interesting points there. I think that for me, team tournaments just offer a really interesting, you know, opportunity. I think the Adepticon team tournament sometimes for some people becomes just a reason to go drink a lot and become blitzed.
Remember the Adepticon where I was playing the 40K friendly and the person next to me had to be stretchered out of there because he
I remember you telling me this.
In his own sick at 11 o'clock in the morning because he was just like, he had a like 32 ounce, like big old jug water bottle. They filled half with Diet Coke, half with vodka, and he refilled it. I've still got the stain on the snow on one of my Marines where some Diet Coke spilled over on them. At least it was Diet Coke.
It was just Diet Coke.
Liquids that spilled, that's the least offensive to get on my models. But that was pretty rough. So
I remember that. I remember the person being carted out. So, I mean, you know, we ran into a situation, and this is the really unfortunate thing because it was such a great event up to this point. And then we ran into these guys, these orc players, and, you know, at least two of them were so drunk, like they couldn't even roll dice at that point, you know, and to me, I immediately stopped having fun when I'm like, can you please just roll your attack or, you know, you know, but the worst part about it was when we rocked up to the table, these four players were all playing orcs, and it was one of the coolest orc armies I'd ever seen. And I was so interested in like, oh man, this is going to look really cool. Like, it was such a beautiful army. And then, you know, they kind of ruined the whole experience for us at that point.
Makes it an even bigger disappointment.
We actually dropped out of the event after that game because we were just like, this is not for us at this point, you know, whatever.
Part of any collaborative event, which here's the thing, even a GT is still a collaborative event to a point, and I will let you know about that in a second, is ensuring the enjoyment of the people around you. And if you want to get absolutely sloshed while pretending to roll dice and the other person does too, enjoy, like have at, but don't inflict that on random people who maybe aren't drinking, don't drink less, whatever, because that sucks. Like no one
wants there for a different experience.
You two can join the Table War Charities Nova Open Liar's Dice event. Get drunk and do it with a good cause and make some money for kids that need some help.
Perfect. And again, I've had many a beer whilst playing a Warhammer of one flavor or another and had a very good time doing so.
That's right.
But usually my opponents were on the same level. You know, I wasn't again passing at 11 o'clock in the morning.
So tell us how you were saying a GT or a tournament is like a collaborative type of situation. What are you thinking there?
So there was this one point a few years ago where there was a stream of some, and I don't watch Warhammer streams because I find it to be tremendously boring to watch. I'll be honest. Even when I'm the one on stream, I find it
even when I'm the one streaming, I find it boring.
Yeah, there's a reason I don't live stream with Goonhammer. I think it's very uninteresting. But there is this time a few years ago where there was some like top table game at a GT. And at this point in 40K's rules, when you started deep striking, that was the last thing you did in your movement phase. Like it was specifically worded at the end of your movement phase, you do deep strikes.
Still is.
I'm not sure that actually is the case anymore.
Oh, I think it is.
I need to double check that, or maybe I've cheated. Anyway,
I think I could be wrong.
But I still
Look, I'm more than likely I'm wrong.
The thing is, I still do out of habit because I don't want to gotcha myself.
What were you gonna say, Josh? Hold on.
Reinforcements is end of movement.
Okay,
there you go.
But there was this event where, at this one point, this person starts their turn. They start moving, and before they finish moving their stuff, before they move anything, they just go, okay, I deep strike these guys here, and they go to move something else, and their opponent goes, you can't do that. You deep struck.
I remember this.
And they just reach the hand and just go, good game, and just leave because that was it. And that sucks. That is not a test of player skill. That is
a gotcha.
That is a gotcha. That is a test of a flow chart, not of player skill.
Right.
That's the sort of thing where if you're like, we had our whole conversation on the Badcast about playing by intent that very much factors into this.
Yep.
But the thing that you should do in that case, as a good like sports person, is go, that happens at the end of your movement phase, right? Okay,
so
cool.
Why don't you pick those up?
Why don't you pick those up
until you finish your movement phase?
Yeah.
Or it really is irrelevant, but you should know that is the last thing you're supposed to do.
Right. One of these things, like you kind of have to meet your opponent in the middle, because winning based on a technicality like that doesn't feel good. That you're not the better player, and GT is a test of player skill. That you just remember this one bit of minutia. Like when I was playing with Nick last week, he was like, I'm going to remind you at the end of your turn to pick your scouts up, whether you like it or not, because he's like, you'll probably forget because I know you. And when he did, I was like, I know I left them there on purpose, but thank you. When I played Kazra Hushidar at the Storm of Silence, he's an amazing player, like one of the best games of 40k I've played in my entire freaking life. And at the end of each turn, I'd be like, by the way, you can pick up a few units. And he just goes, thank you. If I forget, just remind me. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. And we were both kind of like helping each other out in that way. Like, I'm not going to tell you how to beat my army or anything of the sort, but I am going to be like, when you move your units nearby, I'm going to go, is your intent to stay outside of Overwatch range of my Redeemer or move within? Because I don't want to win on a gotcha. Like when I played Forest and he was moving his battle suits up to my land radar, I'm like, you sure you want to put him there? Because I'm going to fire Overwatch. He just goes, yeah, I expect you to. And I go, all right, cool. You have to kind of...
Winning on a gotcha just doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good. Yeah.
No. You're there for a different reason, and it's not to have a good collaborative game experience. It's like you're there to win at that point. Mm-hmm. And that's... And what are you like... How much accomplishment do you have at the end of that game? Like, oh yeah, I won that game because that guy...
I think you can be there to win. You're both there to win.
Yeah.
It's how you get...
How do you want to win, though?
Mm-hmm.
It's the journey's part of the destination, right? It's... Do
you want to win by being your opponent's best game of the day? Or do you want to win because you remember some bit of semi-obscure legalese in the back of the rule book?
And some people, quite frankly, may enjoy that. Like some people may win the whole tournament and go, and then I beat this opponent because he didn't know that this thing happened. And I'm like, yeah, I assume you get like a golf clap, at that response, but nobody's gonna be like, well, that was a genius tactical move on your part. It just wasn't. Yeah. So I think what you're heading towards though, Campbell, is that like collaboratively, you're trying to make an experience that both players enjoy, regardless of the high level of competition or not, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was playing like this at the top tables at Squig City. Like that's just, I play the way I want to be played with. Like my buddy Michael, when he rolls up to a game at a GT, any tournament, any event, whatever, he'll usually say like, "Hey, hi, I'm Michael. My intent is for this to be your favorite game of the day."
I like that.
And he will do his best to do so. And by the way, he is a goddamn shark at 40K. He's really good. I very rarely beat him. But he has that same very permissive, friendly, open way of playing and being very clear with stuff. Again, it's the sort of thing where at the start of the game, I'll ask, do you have any questions about this army? Does your army have any gotchas? Something like that. And just by opening that door, you are inviting that conversation to happen. And that means both players will hopefully be willing to kind of meet in the middle and discuss that.
Yeah. I mean, the definition of collaboration is, working together to achieve an outcome, usually in an intellectual capacity. And I think, you can't argue that 40K takes a ton of it does take intelligence. It does take an intellect, and that's more than evident to me as I've been playing my wife, where I see that she's like, I'm really struggling to remember all this and remember something that comes secondhand to me, where I'm like, wow, it really is a lot, like for somebody new to take in, and I've taken that for granted.
Learning Warhammer is like learning a language and learning like motorcycle maintenance. I don't know. It's learning a lot of like hard skills and soft skills at the same time. That's
a very interesting point you made. And the soft skills are probably honestly the hardest to teach people. And some people just don't get it.
Right.
And I see that, like I used to be the vice president of IT at the company I'm at. And my focus was, it's good that you guys all know how to fix these problems on computers. Like that's without a doubt the important thing. But fundamentally, this is a support organization that is internally focused. And so you need to have good customer service skills, and we had some guys that were not the best at fixing things. Like there were guys that were better or gals that were better on the team than them at fixing things. But that was always the individual I would send to go to the executives if they had a problem. Like, oh, we'll send this guy up there, because I knew, like, even if he couldn't fix it himself, he'd be like, you know what? Let me take your laptop and go fix the problem, or let me get you a solution, because it's now outside of the scope of them. But they were so good at the soft skills. They could talk to these executives, and these are, fairly low ranked people in the company talking to executives at the company. And I had executives that were like, oh, send this guy up, to help me out. And I'd be like, man, no problem. Just because they would have won the sportsmanship score in IT, right? So it's a really interesting point that you make, that it's not just the learning the language of 40K and how it plays. It's also learning how to be a good teammate, how to be a good opponent, how to be a good winner, and how to be a good loser as well.
Yep.
Yeah. That's really, that gives me some things to think about. All right. I mean, bottom line, I think the benefits of thinking about this as a collaborative environment, whether it's a competition you're playing in, it's all competition, right? I mean, fundamentally 40K
you are
competition.
Opposing is not cooperative. You're not, there are co-op. Hey, Kill Team has a co-op mode now.
That's true.
So there is,
I was going to bring that up.
There is literally collaborative gaming in that way. So there is co-op.
But you're playing against the game designer.
Ooh, that's true. That's true. But here's the thing: he's not there to keep you from cheating. So
no. So you can also be a really bad, loser.
That's right. You don't have to be graceful in that moment.
Yeah, but I think if you think about approaching all these things in a collaborative way, it fosters a sense of good sportsmanship, community. Campbell, you talked about your buddy. It's like, I want to make this the best game of 40K you've played. Man, that's a really great message. Like the way I have the same message, but I like the way
that's a great goal.
He makes it more succinct than mine. Like mine is usually like, I walk up and I go, I am a super easy opponent in terms of if you need to take a move back or you realize you've made a mistake, no problem. You just let me know. We'll make sure it happens, because I want us to have a good time. But I like the way he says it better. So it fosters like a sense of good sportsmanship and community. It creates opportunities, as you were talking, Campbell, with, hey, let's pair this guy up with this guy, because they're going to learn more from this event, and they may learn new strategies. It creates these, moments. We often talk about whether you're winning or losing. Like if you're starting to lose, like go for the moments, like go for the things that like really leap out at you. I've had, Shell like take out things with the Demon Prince where she's losing the rest of the game, but she's like, oh yeah, but I'm going to rip these guys apart, and it's those moments that collectively we're like, you know what? Yeah. Abaddon is going to charge the avatar of Cain. And maybe I'll get lucky, but this doesn't look good for Abaddon and his Terminators. And then, I think also like when you're setting stuff up like Josh and I are, it encourages like creative problem solving and project, management and new innovations. Like the idea of not having points at all in this game, Josh, where it's just like a focus on narrative victories. Like that's something I've never done. Like that would be really, really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's so many ways to win that why does it have to be an abstract point system? Like we're here to tell a story at the end of the day, right? That experience is very catered towards telling a story and having a really fun game that everybody is. It's probably the most collaborative experience you could cater.
Yeah.
So let's just lean into it.
This is gonna sound super cheesy, but then when everybody has a good time at the table, you both win, right?
Everyone wins.
Yeah.
The real points are the friends you made along the way.
That's right.
That's right.
And as someone who I came up in a historical wargaming environment, and I'm going to tell you this right now. When the Americans landed on June 6th on Normandy, they weren't trying to get more victory points. They were trying to get off that beach and take those bunkers.
That's
that
right.
was the victory condition. The victory condition was not, holding 3 equally sized.
Listen, if they stayed within 5 meters of this flag, the Germans had to give up.
Yeah, no, actually, the war would have ended.
Moral victory there.
You win.
Acti Americana.
One of the things I laugh about in Space Marine, the video game, like there's this areas where you like have to like sometimes get objectives, and there's like a ring around the objective. And I'm like, you realize that's like 40 millimeters out from the
It's 3 inches.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's a good summary. I think we kind of beat the topic to death. So let's do this. Let's take a short break. We'll come back and then we'll close out the show. All right, we're back to close out the show. Josh and Campbell, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Putting together a show is a very collaborative event.
Exactly.
Scheduling alone is like a collaboration piece. So.
It takes a village.
Yeah.
It takes a village to cast a pod.
That's right.
I had some final thoughts listed here, but I think we kind of hit all those already. So there's no point in really, I think, knocking that out. But I think what I would say is please, if you've done some of these kind of like collaborative events with your friends and stuff, like we see occasionally these things get shared on the IC's group or Discord, or, if you want to share it in the Badcast Discord as well. Like I love seeing pictures of this. And one of the things I love seeing pictures of, while I like seeing pictures of like the models themselves, like in combat or whatever, I like seeing the pictures of the people around the table, playing as well and having a good time. And I think that tells like a huge part for me. When I look at other people's pictures, I always look for like, what do the people look like that are playing, and are they having fun? So
there's the narrative on the tabletop, but then there's just the story of the day that actually unfolded with the real life people there. And like that I don't capture that nearly enough because I'm always just down with the models in the immersive narrative of
that's
the game.
Usually when I'm taking pictures of you taking pictures of models.
Yeah, right, exactly.
There's a reason that like it's called the White Dwarf handshake.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because almost every White Dwarf battle report ends with a picture of the players shaking hands. Because that's ideally how your games end, is with 2 people shaking hands and smiling. And 2, it reinforces that there's people playing these games. Even if it's a tactical simulation, quote unquote, or whatever, it is being played by people doing it for fun.
I don't know if we came up with that term. I don't know if we were the first people to come up with that term, but we came up with that on our own like a long time ago, the White Dwarf handshake. So I don't know if that was, I'm sure somebody else has made that.
If it's a phrase that worked its way into my vernacular from y'all, I'm
happy.
Be shocked. Yeah.
I don't know if we were the first person
Been there
to call
so long now, it's hard to say.
terrain the Third Army on the table too.
That one's yours. If it's not, yours, that's at least the first time I heard online.
Yeah, that was. I think I don't remember who came up with that title. It was a good title. Might have been Zach. Anyway, you can leave us reviews on iTunes. We absolutely love getting reviews of the show. It helps other people find it. Somebody just joined the group just recently, and they were like, "Oh, I was, feeling down, and I was lamenting the days of listening to the ICs when I found out, oh, you guys came back like a year and a half ago." I'm like, yeah, I don't know how else to tell other people other than, please help get the word out and let them know we're back. We've been back.
There's not billboards
buy some
around.
T-shirts. Wear the T-shirts to events and local game stores. Let the people know. Put the word out there. Hit the streets.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
That's right.
That's right. And we'll also listen. If you are, I recognize that there are people out of the U.S. that want to buy the shirts. It's very difficult shipping when you're running a small operation like this outside the U.S. The thing I will say is if you have friends that are going to Adepticon, we're talking about doing like an Adepticon order where if you're going to be at Adepticon and you want to pick up your shirt there, we'll have you place orders and we'll bring the shirts to you. So if you have friends that are overseas that are coming to visit and then you want to take a shirt back to them, we can make that happen. So it's just very expensive to ship overseas. Maybe the next time we'll not do the shirts personally and we'll go through some kind of third-party provider. We just really like the quality that we're getting on the shirts. Like somebody didn't buy one because they're like, well, my old one's still in great shape. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem with buying a quality shirt. Like it lasts a long time. Should have sold this stuff that fails on you.
Yeah, you should have used the old company that made shirts that smelled like gasoline that we used on the Badcast.
Oh my God.
We changed providers. They were not great.
That is horrible.
The current ones are good. The old ones smelled like gasoline and wore out very fast.
That's
very
funny.
Flammable.
Turned out they were flammable too.
We have fewer listeners because they kept spontaneously combusting for a while. There's a lawsuit. Don't worry about it.
This one guy went to burn his Dark Elf army, and next thing we know,
actually, Carl, it was High Elves.
Whatever. He didn't know anymore.
I just had to throw it, actually. That's right. He was blinded by rage.
Oh, the point still stands.
Oh, that's so good.
Beautiful.
All right. I just mentioned we've got a Facebook group. It's highly popular. It's a super positive environment to be in. We have a Patreon. You can find out more information about the Patreon at theindependentcharacters.com. And then Goonhammer, you're still trapped in content hell.
Yes, I am. I'm in a Hellraiser-esque puzzle box of video production. It's almost over, but it's still happening. But yeah,
it's like Groundhog Day. What the actual time span of Groundhog Day is supposed to be like 200 years,
2,000 years,
right? 2,000. Yeah.
I don't remember what it was. Super long time.
Some huge number.
You might be thinking that making 20, 30, however many videos about army detachments to make me like retain anything, but no, this is like cramming for tests and immediately offloading it from my brain every single time. It is injecting like a Game Boy cartridge every time I finish a video. So
you have to blow in it.
Yeah. Don't worry, get to work.
All right. Well, you guys got anything else you want to add? No?
I think
all
we're
right.
good.
Well, this is Carl.
This is Josh.
And this is Campbell.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon, where working together is the key to an elevated gaming experience.
And alone, we can do so little, but together, we can do so much.
And we like to stop, collaborate, and listen.
I was so mad when I saw you. I was like, oh, that's the perfect ending. All right, we'll catch you next time.
And stop, drop, and roll if you bought the old t-shirts.
This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.